know the technology we put behind getting food on your plate? Digitized consumer journeys and dynamic pricing calculated on the cloud? There's reactive cloud infrastructure and wearable technologies that connect directly to inventory and warehouse management systems. We build enterprise and middleware platforms and machine learning-driven geo-routing technologies. We serve customers with e-commerce platforms for restaurants and consumers running on data-optimized UX systems. And that barely covers it. We are an innovator for Cisco, the world's leading food service company. Cisco Labs, unlimited technologies, endless opportunities, transforming food service.
You can change tomorrow with a range of leading business software solutions. CAMS offers a full range of solutions in governance, risk and compliance, strategy execution, project and portfolio management, talent management, meeting management, and flexible workflow services, as well as real-time reporting and insights. You have the flexibility to use what your business needs. One solution, two solutions, or bundle them all together for a complete business solution. Easy to use, industry recognised and intuitive, you'll get buy-in from your whole team. Our solutions are available out of the box, rapidly deployed for quick time to value, backed by a great CAMS team with 25 years experience, used all over the world by businesses of all kinds, and every solution is supported by CAMS College, offering next generation customer care and training. So if you want to make the right decisions, manage your risk, align your team, and focus on what matters, stay ahead with CAMS. Request your demo today.
Career choices are a way of defining your future success. Select the field that you want to excel and define a career path that inspires you to work with passion. We, as your guiding light, educate, empower and equip you with a solid foundation for a brighter future. Igniting creativity, assuring employability, technologically equipped, giving exposure to the real corporate world, and fueling personality development are some of the reasons why you should choose the best and graduate to shine. Choose Appit. Appit.
very good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so very much for joining us in numbers. Welcome to the 4th edition of the Colombo Test Automation Conference, brought to you by the Sri Lanka Association of Software and Services Companies, more popularly known as the SLASCOM. But the SLASCOM is the country's national chamber and live wire for the knowledge and innovation industry in the country. They have over 200 member companies, and these companies attribute to approximately 90% of the IT BPM industry export revenue. Particularly over the last couple of years, automated testing has taken center stage because it has become quite important. Well, after any development, tests are carried out to see if the features function as expected, or if they don't. Well, if they don't, well, there's an alert raised, and from there on, things are tested and corrected. What test automation does effectively is it automates this whole process, cuts down time and effort. As a result, this has become a very important thing that people are closely embracing in the development world today. That's a little bit about what we're going to talk about, and a quick intro to today's agenda. This conference is also built to be a great improviser on what we already know about the subject. As we go online for the first time in our 4th edition of this conference, we are looking for not only participants from the country, but from all across the world. It brings together the experience and the seasoned knowledge in the tech industry. The discussions today in store will not only share insight on how we manage our practices during this pandemic, but also in the time to come after that. This particular conference, the 4th edition of the Colombo Test Automation, will focus on 6 topics delivered by 7 speakers, and the discussions will evolve around automated API testing, quality assurance versus value assurance, verification of machine learning apps, continuous performance engineering, and of course, designing and making the move towards high quality automated testing. Before we dive into any of these, we head into our welcome address, which is expected to set the tone for today and for a deeper insight about today's conference. To do that, I'd like to invite Sandra De Zoisa, who's the Vice Chairperson of SLASCOM, Forum Board Lead at the Quality Forum at SLASCOM, and also operates as the Chief Customer Officer at Dialogue Asiata PLC. Sandra, I call upon you to take our online audience, address them, and own this space for the next several minutes. Ladies and gentlemen, here is Sandra De Zoisa.
Thank you, Ajmal. Just want to do a quick check. So you can see me and you can hear me, right?
Absolutely, Sandra. Loud and clear.
Okay, great. So a very warm welcome to everybody who has joined us today in our virtual edition of what is popularly known as CTAC. So CTAC 2020 very fittingly has taken the virtual format, which is the case the world over given the COVID and the pandemic situation. Everything in life has gone digital and virtual. And in keeping with that, we've decided that it actually gives us better opportunity that we can have for the first time our keynote speaker who joins us from overseas, and as well as we can have participants who can join us from across the shores, and then it becomes a forum that's open virtually, globally. So we are very excited at the lineup. Ajmal has kind of explained to you all of that. My role today is just to very warmly welcome you on behalf of SLASCOM. I would try to keep it really brief because I know all of you are looking forward to the proceedings that we have and the next 4 hours in which hopefully will be very value adding, great knowledge sharing opportunity, great opportunities for collaborating with each other and continuing the discussions, not just within this forum today, but on an ongoing basis. So what we really want to do is to actually invite you. Now, the SLASCOM Quality Forum started off 12 years ago. I started off the Quality Forum, and a lot of the members have remained with us throughout this entire 10, 12 years. So very seasoned, mature, committed, dedicated, passionate bunch of people that have brought this session to you. What we'd like is, I would like to invite all of you who work in this 250 odd SLASCOM member companies within the quality engineering space to actually join the SLASCOM Quality Forum so that all of you also have an opportunity to give back and to very freely share in this collaborative space. So that's one of the requests I have to kind of add value to the industry as well as to our community that we come from, because it just gives us so many opportunities now to be able to share and learn from each other. Now, having said that, in the lineup, I can tell you that we have fantastic seasoned speakers who are actually practitioners and committed practitioners from one of, not one, many of our top companies in the IT space in Sri Lanka. So I'm also particularly very excited today to have Anton with us from Bulgaria, who's doing the keynote speak. And hopefully we can encourage Anton to continue to engage with the SLASCOM Quality Forum in a way that we can continue the dialogue here on. And we plan to bring many more such sessions. As you know, the SLASCOM Quality Forum, we bring you sessions which are useful and valuable based on the feedback we get from participants. And we've been doing that for a decade. So at least once in every 2 months, we try to bring you a session. And we would like to continue that same trend now, perhaps even do better than that, and take them virtually. So we'd like you to stay with us till the end of the session, engage in the discussions. And I'd like to also take this opportunity to thank all our sponsors, as well as our speakers, and of course, the team from the Quality Forum and the SLASCOM Corporate Office, without whom we would not have been able to bring this session to you. Finally, to the speakers, Anton, as well as my own colleagues from the forums and the member companies, thank you so much for your support, and to the participants for being here. So without further ado, I pass it back for us to start our keynote speak. Ajmal, perhaps you have a word or two. Thank you very much.
Thank you so very much, Sandra, for that kind words and giving us a bright introduction about what this forum is all about. Like she rightly mentioned, yes, it was something that she spearheaded several years ago. The Quality Forum it has come thus far in establishing itself in the SLASCOM framework as a pillar, and of course in the country as a quality wing. Like she encouraged, this is opportunity, and it also calls for participativeness. Be participative, share your knowledge. So there are situations where you can ask questions. We will be sharing links where you can send in your questions, which will later be answered by our speakers. All that is there. Participation is opened. During the icebreaker, we also have a quick quiz that you can participate and then share your knowledge with us, show how good you are. All that coming in, like also Sandra rightly mentioned, big thank you to our sponsors, our platinum sponsor, Cisco Labs, our gold sponsor, who is CAMS, APIT, and of course, BizTech Global. We also have Dialogue Enterprise, who of course is our corporate sponsor for the events that are carried out by SLASCOM. Our first speaker for this conference, who also happens to be the keynote speaker, actually is the CTO and co-founder of Automate the Planet Limited, investor of Bellatrix Test Automation Framework and Meiza Distributed Test Runner. Anton has 10 years of experience in the field of automated testing. He designs and writes scalable test automation solutions and tools. He consults and trains companies regarding their automated testing efforts. Part of his job is to lead a team of passionate engineers helping companies succeed with their test automation using the company's Bellatrix tooling. In this session, Anton will guide us on how to optimize and stabilize your flaky tests, improve test readability, maintainability, reusability, extensibility, and of course, choosing the best design for your framework, and of course, to speed up your tests. So ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce our keynote speaker, Anton Angelov. Anton, I call upon you to take on the online audience and tell us what you've got.
Well, just to check, do you hear me and see the screen?
I can hear you and see the screen as well, Anton. Okay,
perfect. Thank you for the invite. By the way, I really, last year I was in Sri Lanka, so I made a Sri Lanka tea, yeah, thank you for having me. I will try to summarize some of the best practices and some of the most exciting patterns from my book, Design Patterns for High Quality Automated Tests. It's actually, I published it like more than a half year ago at the beginning of the year. And actually it became like a bestseller on Amazon. So, but you know, usually I really love to share my knowledge during conferences. So I'm doing a lot of these free talks everywhere. I can speak for 3 days about patterns and practices, so it will be hard to explain everything in 40 minutes, but I will give my best, at least to give you the most valuable things. So without further ado and too much theory, I just want to explain what actually a design pattern is. Just in short, it's basically like a template for solving particular, problem. It's like an algorithm that you can apply to different problems. And actually, usually you can modify the patterns a little bit to fit the different context of the problem. Just to know that, this is why even through the book, there are like 10 different types, for example, of page object model, so that they can, support the different high quality attributes of the tests. And what are these high quality test attributes? For me, the first thing and one of the most important is when you look at the test without huge comments or test cases, your test should, you should know what the test is doing without too much, nitty-gritty details about the low-level API like WebDriver, APM, or Winamp driver. The next and maybe one of the most important things is that basically your library or a framework should be able and allow you to easily maintain your tests, because as you know, most of you that are practitioners and engineers writing a lot of tests, that most of the time like you spend like 30% of your time to write the test, but afterwards you have to maintain them, to check the results and everything. So the maintainability and reusability of logic is really crucial for every successful framework and library. Then the next thing I call API usability. API is basically, name of the classes, name of the methods, how many parameters you use, how easy it is to find out how to write something. This is API usability. And the better it is, this means that the faster you will be able to write tests. It will be easier for you to learn how to use the framework or the library. So this is really important as well. And maybe the crucial difference between a library and a framework, I usually put a lot of theory explaining the difference. Right now we don't have the time, but maybe the core difference between a library and a framework is that the framework can be extended and customized. Usually this is not the case with the libraries, and especially if you're working for a big company or corporation or whatever, and you want your library or a framework to be used across multiple teams or even companies, this means that you need to allow the different teams to change and modify, the framework and the different methods there, so that they can fit their needs. Maybe this is the boldest point about the frameworks. And maybe the last one is the learning curve, or if a new team member starts, how easy is for him or her to learn how to use and to write new tests. I bet that most of you spent countless hours teaching new colleagues to how to write proper tests, to teach them and everything. If the API usability is okay, and there is a good documentation and other things, maybe this learning curve will be shorter, and this person can start faster to contribute to the tests. There are a couple of test failures and reasons for failures of the tests. Of course, maybe the one that we hope for is that there is a real problem in the system and our tests are catching it. We are writing the test for that, right? And for the insurance purposes, of course. However, there are many cases that this is not the case, and many often, in my observation, more than 80 to 90% of the tests are failing due to the rest of the reasons, like problems in the test environment, someone is deploying the website or the build is broken, or something like that, or someone is doing wall tests during your execution against the QA environment, right? Then it might be, of course, a problem in the tests. This happens quite often. This is the so-called flaky tests. They pass a few times, then they fail, because in many cases, in a minute, we will see many examples through code where we used hard-coded pauses, or they're asynchronous problems that we need to solve, but we solve them with, these pauses. And this is why once the website is fast, everything, is green, but then everything starts failing. So yeah, these are the flaky tests. There are many patterns that I will show you that can solve this particular issue. Then there is, of course, the problem that many people neglect, but it's a real problem. And I saw that many people do it, but it's not the best practice. This so-called test-on-test dependency. Again, we will see an example for it. This means that, for example, you rely that this particular test will pass, for example, logging you into the system, and then the second test, you are sure for the order, will require the user to be logged into the system to do something. So this is not a best practice. Usually the best practice is to make your tests independent from each other. Another common problem is when you use hard-coded data. This usually happens when you want to basically execute your test against different environments, but you haven't used, for example, configurations files or Excel sheets or something like that. And you hard-coded basically everything in constants or directly in the tests, and you forgot to change something. So again, usually the best practice is to, probably we won't have the time to check that, but probably the best practice is to use configurations files for the different environments. And of course, a big part of the framework and the library, we already talked about the maintainability and reusability, is to decrease the code duplication. Usually the code duplication is one of the main reasons for when you refactor something, or imagine maybe the easiest example here is when you use WebDriver tests and you have these locators which help you to locate elements on the page. And instead of using some pattern for reusing this locator, you're just copy pasting it. And afterwards, you forgot to change the locator in a few places. So this is one example for code duplication. If you forgot afterwards to fix it, this might be a problem. So now it's time to look into, I don't like to talk much about theory. For me, you'll get all the patterns when we look into the code. So yeah, in a minute I will do the demo. We can directly go to some examples. For the job in the book and in the different articles that I write, we use this demo website. Demos Bellatrix is basically like a real shopping cart, imaginary shopping cart for buying rockets. So our use case will be that we want to navigate to this website. We want to add to the cart a rocket. Then the thing that we want is that we want to apply, because we have a birthday, so we want to apply a coupon. And now, the rockets are cheaper. We usually, when we write an automated test, we want to, check all of these calculations and everything. Then we can update the cart. As you can see, everything, our website is written in the latest technologies. This means that it's basically asynchronous. It's not reloading the whole page. We are using Ajax. And yeah, depending how you write your tests, WebDriver is not okay in the normal scenario to automate that, but I will show you how we can handle it. Then we click the proceed checkout. We are filling all of this information here for the billing and the shipping, and then we place the order. This is our first test case. Our second test is, again, we are doing the same thing, but when we're on this page, we need to click here the login, because the first time we are a new user, but we are checking the create an account, which means that the second time, if we write our tests depend to each other, we will depend that we already have the account. So we can log in, and then this information here will be pre-filled for us. So we need to check whether it's pre-filled, and so on and so forth. All of these code examples and everything, it's part of GitHub repository. I can send it to you, the organizer, so they can give it to you. It's open source, everything, the code from all chapters. Now we'll look into the code from one of the chapters where basically I wrote this test 3 times using no patterns. Then I used a little bit timeouts that come from WebDriver, and then I used another pattern just to see the difference. And also here I'm showing some best practices in version 1. So I'm a junior, and then this is my first test, you know. And what I did, this is, by the way, C#. Maybe next year there will be a book on Java. I already wrote all the code, but for these examples, I will use C#. But again, all of the patterns and everything that I will tell you, it's one-to-one in Java. Nothing special about the language. They are almost identical. So this is for the ones that I use .NET. This is MS Test Project. This is a test class where basically I installed everything needed for working with WebDriver. So here we have a private variable to the driver. And once for all of the tests in the class, we start the browser. In our case, this is Chrome. And after all of the tests from the class, the 3 of them execute, we close the browser. So we basically reuse it. And then again, this is like, I'm a junior, so I wrote everything inside this particular test, no page objects, no patterns, nothing. And in order to handle the synchronization issues, with these loading indicators, right, I put these hard-coded pauses, thread sleep. I think it's the same in Java. So the thing that we do, again, we are navigating to the website. Then, as you can see, there are many calls here to find the particular elements using different locators, CSS or ID or XPath in certain places. Nothing fancy. I mean, I'm just searching for the elements, clicking on them, typing the text. Maybe again, here the most important part is that on many places, in order to handle these spinners, I'm using thread sleeps. As you can see there, this is equal to 5 seconds. Maybe for the whole test, there is more than 40 seconds. There are 3 tests. You can imagine how much time this is. The problem with this approach is that sometimes this, for example, a spinner will disappear for 2 seconds, then we will wait additional 3 seconds, and then we will continue. But in the worst case, we'll need 6 seconds, but we are waiting for 5, and this here will fail. This is the big problem with thread sleeps. Basically, we are waiting sometimes more than needed. And the second thing is that in many cases, this leads to flaky tests because they're, as I said, sometimes we'll need more time, but we won't have it. The second problem in this test class is that basically, as I explained, where I coupled for a reason the two tests, even the three of them. As I said, the second test depends that the first one will pass so that we can reuse the login. Again, this is not a best practice. Usually, as I said, why this is a problem? Because if the first test fails, then the rest of them will fail because they depend on it. So you should strive to create the data and everything for each test separately. In many of the projects that I work for in my company, we usually, for all of the tests, we create the test data. Even in the book, there is a dedicated chapter to that. I mean, how to create test data through database or API or whatever, in different patterns regarding that. Of course, right now I will just try to explain the more simpler things. But again, the best practice is to create the data for each test separately. So one way to solve at least partially the problem is in version 2 here. Probably most of you have used it. You know the difference between implicit and explicit weight. Basically, the implicit weight means I think I have a slide for that. Basically, the difference between the implicit and explicit weight is that the implicit weight is like a global timeout. As you saw in many places, basically I use different timeouts. In one of the places, we had to wait, especially when we place the order for 10 seconds. And this is a problem with the global timeout, right? Because usually the global timeout should be equal to the longest pause in our tests. And this is why it's not suggested even from the maintainers of Selenium. They suggested to use the so-called explicit weight. The explicit weight comes from, this is the implicit weight, basically the global timeout, in this case 30 seconds. The explicit weight, it's like a dynamic weight. It comes from this WebDriver weight. In Java, I think it was called fluent weight. So basically we will wait. For example, we say the maximum timeout here is 30 seconds, but we will basically stop waiting once the condition is true. If this appears in 5 seconds, we'll stop the waiting and then we'll continue, which is great for our case. Again, we use this WebDriver wait class, and then we have this until method, and we use this expected conditions. Basically, this is a function. The function in C# and I think in Java, it's basically a delegate. The delegate is like a variable, not variable, but parameter or a pointer to another method. In our case here, we'll wait for the element to exist. But we have all of these kind of different conditions. For example, waiting for element to exist, to be visible, to be clickable, and all of that. And we can basically write our own such conditions. So the thing that I did in version 2 is that I created, first, to make the tests a little bit more reusable and readable. Like the smallest thing that I could do is that I basically moved some of the common logic between the three tests in private methods. This is the first refactoring without patterns that we can apply, so that we can at least a small bit reuse some of the logic. And then the other thing that I did is that I create these helper methods. Maybe the most important one is this wait and find element. Basically, we're passing here as a parameter the bilocator, the native bilocator of WebDriver. And here, every time we're initializing WebDriver wait. Again, you can reuse that, probably initialize it in the constructor and everything. just to be more visible to you in the presentation, I put it here. Also, this is not the best possible method name, as you know. In order to follow single responsibility and everything, usually our methods and classes should do only a single thing. And usually when you have end word in names, this means that probably your method or whatever is doing two things. For now, we will ignore that because we are going to use other patterns that are going to improve that. For now, I just wanted to show you another meaningful way to remove some of the pauses. So here we are using this WebDriver until expected end conditions and everything. Many people ask me why I included this in the book, whether this is not deprecated or not. No, it's not deprecated. Actually, they just moved it to a separate GitHub project because, you know, the core maintainers decided that they don't have the time to maintain all of it. So basically the core maintainer of the C# repo for WebDriver separated it. And now this was moved, these expected conditions, to this particular GitHub project and a package called .NET Selenium Extras Wait Helpers. I don't think that for Java there was such a problem. Anyways, because many people use C# and they see these deprecated warnings. No, it's not deprecated, it's still there, everything is there. So how our test changed, we removed some of the pauses here. And instead of using thread sleep, right now we use this wait and find element instead of driver find element. But every time when we you know, want to do something with the element, we're waiting for it to exist, and then we continue, which is okay. I mean, however, in a few places here and there, we still have these hard-coded pauses because the WebDriver wait is not enough. In order to be able to, you know, fix that, you know, especially when we have asynchronous JavaScript, basically we can use, as you know, in WebDriver, we can execute JavaScript. So one way to handle AJAX requests, before moving to the decorator, in a minute I will explain the third version, but basically I'm just going a little bit faster, but in order to handle the rest of the pauses, and if we want to remove them, we can basically execute JavaScript through, you know, through WebDriver. It allows us to basically, when we cast it to iJavaScript executor, basically this is an interface that iWebDriver implements. Actually, the Chrome driver, Firefox driver, and all of them. So when basically it allows you to use this method called execute script, where basically you can put any JavaScript that you can do. And since our website is using Ajax, jQuery, we can execute other jQuery methods inside the context of the website. And here with this script, basically we're checking whether all of the requests finished with this condition here. And the magic here is that I'm going through the WebDriver wait, execute this a few times until this condition is okay. Again, during a training that I did a couple of days ago, basically I explained that this WebDriver wait is nothing more than just infinite loop with a condition inside that checks if this is okay, it's breaking the loop. And basically, usually even when you initialize the WebDriver wait, you are setting this sleep interval. Basically, this is like a pause that it's put inside the infinite loop, that it's thread sleeping. By default, I think it's 2 seconds or 1 second, something like that, but you can change it. But yeah, as I said, internally, if we look into the code, because it's open source, you'll see that this is an infinite loop. This is it. It's not so complicated. Basically, we're looping through that and executing it a few times until are sure that all of the Ajax requests are finished, and then we can continue. The third version, in order to improve, the readability and all of this complexity, because right now maybe it's fine when you have one test class, but imagine when you have, like in my case, for some of the projects, we have like 10,000 tests. You can imagine that without a framework, this is, you cannot go with these private methods, right? This is why we need some kind of a library or a framework to handle all of this for us and to make it more readable. Maybe the beginning of everything is that I will explain right now in short a really cool pattern that I accommodated to solve this problem. It's highly used in programming usually. It's called decorator design pattern. It has two, like I skipped the theory explaining what solid is. For some of you that are more programming oriented, probably you have heard of this acronym solid. It's basically an acronym for a few programming, let's say, rules that you for high quality code. And one of these solid rules is, again, the extensibility, that basically your classes should be open for extension, but closed for modification, which means that once you wrote the core of your library or anything, you should give away to users or your programmers to extend it, but without modifying it. This is the the core idea of the decorator. Basically, once you wrote the basically the concrete component is basically, you can imagine that like a wrapper to WebDriver. You don't, for example, in I don't know, 5 months, if you decide that you need a logging, like log to a file what happened for troubleshooting reasons, instead of going in directly editing the file where you are calling WebDriver, basically you are creating the so-called decorator. In a minute, it will be clear to you when you see the classes. But basically the idea is that I don't know whether you have heard of this doll, Russian doll, it's called matryoshka. Matryoshka is where you put different dolls inside of each other. This is the whole pattern. Basically, you're, putting a box into a box into a box, using one decorator is calling the other. So one of the reasons is that if you need to add a new logic to the existing one, you are creating a decorator and you are wrapping the existing logic. This is it. Again, in the example, it will be more clear. The another way to improve the library in our case is that the decorator allows us to change a little bit the API. If you recall, one of the high quality attributes was the API usability, which means that it's making our API of the framework in the library a little bit easier to understand, comprehend, and use. So here in our case, I will basically change a few methods from WebDriver and the native element, the iWeb element, so that they are more clear to us. For example, I really hated that they use in native WebDriver the send keys method for many things. For example, you can type text, you can enter, for example, press keys on the keyboard, or you can even upload files through it. So you can do many things, but it's called send keys. For me, when you type text, the method should be called type text, right? So again, in a minute, I will explain everything. So here we have this third version. As you can see, we have many more files, but this is normal for any framework or a library. This is not one of the easiest patterns, but I decided to explain it to you. First, we have an enumeration that it's responsible for, basically, as you can see, we have the different browsers here. As you saw on the diagram, we need to have basically one base class for each component. We will have two. one component for the element and one for the driver. So here I have this abstract class responsible for the driver, changing the API. This driver class will be, as you will see, it will be derived from the different decorators and from the concrete implementations of the driver. So basically here we're defining what we want to expose from from WebDriver, because right now it's a huge interface and we don't want to use many of its methods. So right now I put only 5 of them. I created my own method here called start. As you see, start is actually, here we're implementing another pattern called factory method design pattern. And basically here we're using the enumeration to initialize the browser. And we have quit, of course, which is basically we're going to close the browser. Instead of using, navigate.go to URL like here, we want to improve the, instead of using navigate and then go to URL, in our library, in our implementation, we will skip the navigate because this is more typing every time. As I said, the decorator allows us to change the API in a good way. So we are going to do that. And then as you can see, we have find element and find elements. We're accepting Selenium locator, which is fine. But here we are not returning iWeb element interface that it's from Selenium, but actually we are returning the element abstract class, which is basically here again the other abstract class for the elements that is shared across the concrete implementation and the decorators that are going to add additional action. As you can see, this element class again is an abstract class that basically allows us to change a bit the API. As I said, one of the things that I changed is that I added this type text method instead of send keys. And another thing that I modified is that here I added this property to the by locator. Now our element will know how it was located, which is not the case with the native iWeb element. And then we have the, if you return to the diagram, we need to implement these base classes, the abstract classes. We need one class for the driver and one class for the element. Here is the element. Basically, we're using composition. Again, we're deriving from the abstract class so that we can implement everything. The composition is basically the pattern where instead of using, base class, we are using some properties as variables here, private variables, and we provide them through the constructor. And as you can see, the decorator is basically something like a wrapper. It wraps across the iWeb element and the driver. And basically here, in most places, we are just calling the native iWeb element, the text, the enabled, and so forth. For the click, the improvement that I did is basically that we have this private method wait to be clickable, where we wait for the element to be clickable, through the WebDriver wait, and then we click it. Okay, sure. As I said, yeah, usually I had to have 7 more minutes, but anyway, I know that we were late. So I can give you materials. I mean, there are some recordings for similar sessions. Also, I wrote an articles about it, so I can send it to you. And yeah, just maybe in 1 minute, I will show you what happened here. As you can see, through the decorator, basically, just to wrap up, we use the improved API, right? And every time, basically in this find methods from the driver, here right now we're moving our logic for waiting for the elements to exist. Then we return the element, and then we're doing the actions with the improved API. and there are no more, like, again, we can use afterwards the wait for Ajax to remove all of the pauses. So yeah, I will send you the articles. Also, I will participate, I hope, in the Q&A, so we can discuss many other things if you want, and ask me questions. And maybe later during other virtual or on-site event, we can chat more about patterns, you know. So yeah, thank you, and hope that this was useful to you, and stay tuned. Maybe we will organize something else also.
Thank you so very much to Anton Angelo for that beautiful insight on his particular topic, which was to speak on the areas of design patterns for high quality automated tests. I think Anton did absolute justice to the topic by taking us through a lot of nitty gritty on this particular area, spoke about patterns, correcting poor patterns, flaky tests, in other words, the nature of weights that are there, and a deeper insight to that. And of course, towards the closing stages, I did speak on something called the decorator patterns and how it can help this whole design patterns for high quality automated testing. Well, then we also have an opportunity for everybody to send in questions, the details of which will appear on our screen very shortly, which is you could either scan the code that is on your screen now, or even go to this link that is there, HTTPS followed by the bit.ly link, also CTAC 2020 Q&A. Think this is a case sensitive URL. Just watch out for that as well. So that's that. Thank you so very much, Anton, once again for that beautiful 40 minutes on taking us through on what exactly you think on that particular topic. Following that, I'd like to introduce to you our next speaker, who will be speaking on shifting gears towards autonomous testing. She is Menaka De Silva. She is the quality assurance lead from Zone 24/7. She possesses over 10 years of experience in the IT industry and in the areas of automated testing. Expertise spans across test automation, frame development, and artificial intelligence, along with machine learning-based testing technologies. She is also heading the autonomous testing research by exploring new dimensions of automated testing based on artificial intelligence, machine learning, and data science. The session will share the research experience of Zone 24/7 and of course discuss the benefits and drawbacks of automated testing completely based on artificial intelligence and machine learning. Ladies and gentlemen, here is Menaka De Silva. Menaka, I'd like to ask you to take over the session and tell us what you got over the next 30 minutes.
Okay, awesome. Thanks for that. Thank you once again, everyone, for joining in. So today I decided to speak to you on a topic called shifting gears towards autonomous testing. So within the course of 30 minutes time, let me explain to you what this topic is all about. A brief introduction about myself. I think Ajma gave enough and more information on me. So I'm Menaka De Silva. I'm a lead QA working for Zone 24/7. Let me open up with a question. All right, does your automated testing framework add value to the addition? Does it add value to your framework, your automated testing framework? That's a question I'm posting to everyone. So since this is a CTAC conference, which is one of the largest conferences on test automation in Sri Lanka, so most of y'all are automation testers, test engineers. And given that background, have you acquired the necessary ROI or the return on investment that you wanted when you started automating your test cases? What I have mostly heard from many people that I have met, not only within our company, but within the industry as well, they have mentioned that it's time consuming to create automated scripts, and it requires particularly skilled testers. We call them technical QAs or automation engineers. And it fails to find bugs as the software under test evolves. What if the UI changes in a couple of sprints? How can we keep up with it? And it's also difficult to provide code coverage when the code is expanding. So these kinds of complaints, as well as discussions, we have heard over the past few years. So when it comes to automation ROI, it's still questionable. So currently we are in this kind of a expectation and actual reality difference, where we expect our ROI to increase over time. Although we invest a lot in the beginning, we expect our return on investment to increase, but has it actually happened? How should the next generation automation should look like? A small question here. Ajmal, can you see these disturbances on my screen, or is it only me?
I can see your screen very clearly. How should the next gen automation look like? I don't see anything else other than that. What's disturbing you?
Yeah, so I think the Zoom toolbar was disturbing me. I got rid of that. Thanks, Ajmal.
All right. Okay.
All right. So the next question that I'm going to pose to you all is, how should the next generation automation look like? What do you want to see as a next generation automation tool? What if we can generate tests as well as maintain tests with minimal or no human interaction with increased efficiency and coverage? What if we can do that? Let's imagine this. So as you know, just to give you a history and a background of the evolution of testing. In the early 1980s to 1990, most of the testing was done manually. And then from 1990 to early 2000, the emergence of automation frameworks came to place. And then we came up with open source automation frameworks, because earlier they were mostly commercial tools which were restricted. And in the early 2000 to 2010 decade, open source automation frameworks was a breakthrough. And then we have scalable frameworks where we can plug in different add-ons, and then we can control our framework in a very dynamic way. And right now, 2018 and beyond, we have welcomed autonomous testing. So what is exactly autonomous testing? Autonomous testing is software testing controlled by artificial intelligence and machine learning concepts. So what in this context, in the context of this speech today, what I want to share with you all is a research that is ongoing within our company, where we want to look in how we can create our own automation test framework and the effort that we put in there. And I'll be explaining to you our concept and our data model. And I'll share with you some of our experiences while doing this research. Let me give you a bit of a background. So like I said, we implemented this as a solution to a common problem. So we all have this problem where our automated test cases don't return the investment that we expect from it. And they don't evolve as the software and the test keeps evolving. So to address a common problem only, we started this research. And it was developed, and the expertise is coming from our innovation and R&D unit, which is under Zone 24/7. And we have the necessary expert knowledge from data science, big data, machine learning, including artificial intelligence basics. We have this knowledge base within the company. So it was easier for us to get everyone together and brainstorm and come up with the concept. All right, so just to give a head start for the benefit of the audience, let me explain to you some of the basic machine learning paradigms of the day. So I'm not sure about the knowledge base of the audience. So I know there are university students as well as people from the industry, maybe machine learning experts also joining us. But on any case, there are three main paradigms when it comes to ML or machine learning. So there are many, but basically there are three. So if we talk about three of them, they are called supervised learning, unsupervised learning, reinforcement learning, those three. So if you talk about supervised learning, what we do is we are giving the right training data, input as well as output for a particular machine learning algorithm to learn on its own. So typically these machine learning algorithms are called an agent. So if I mention the word agent in the coming slides, please bear with me and try to understand that I'm talking about a machine learning algorithm. And there is also unsupervised learning, where we give a huge amount of data and see and explore what we can discover through that. And then comes reinforcement learning, where based on an idea of reward and penalty, whereas if your action is rewardable, if it's good, then we reward it. If it's bad, then we give a penalty. So based on this concept, we keep on the machine learning algorithm or the agent keeps on learning on its own. So when it comes to the concept that I'm talking about today, we will be using the reinforcement learning concept. All right, so autonomous testing approaches. Typically, you must have seen, many of you who are interested in this topic, you must have seen in the market, there are so many tools which actually cater to autonomous testing. So these kinds of frameworks mostly target at two functions, either test generation or test maintenance. When it comes to test generation, we train an AI and ML algorithm to create test cases. That means with zero or minimal human interaction, we autonomously create test cases. And then comes test maintenance, where we train an AI and ML algorithm to organize test cases, put them in a hierarchy, or put them in test suites, or put them in business units. So the maintenance of test cases can be handled in that way. So mind you, there are two approaches, and today I'll be talking about the test generation approach. So in test generation, when it comes to our particular concept, we are going to generate three types of test cases autonomously: control validation tests, UI tests, and functional tests. So in the next few slides, I will be talking to you and explaining to you what is under the hood of creating these test cases. Yes. So this is the autonomous testing framework concept model. So as at a glance, you will think that it's a complex, it's a very complex concept, but I'll narrow it down to you. So what I'll do is I will divide this into three levels, like I showed in the earlier slide. I will be first talking about how we create control validation tests, and then I'll be talking about how we create UI verification tests, and then I'll be talking about how we create functional flows. So let's go to the first topic, where we talk about control validations. Yes, so what you have to do is, according to the model, you have to input your DOM. So you will have to input a URL to your whatever your web application is. For in this context, let's imagine it's a warehouse management system, and you have a web application URL, and then you feed it into our system, and using a method called web scraping or data scraping, which is a very common data science tool. What we will be doing is we will crawl through your application, and we will gather huge amounts of data using the DOM. So as you know, the DOM has all your HTML content. So it will have the structure, the hierarchy, and everything. So using web scraping, we will be gathering all that information and classifying it. Initially, we will classify it into an application type. Using artificial intelligence, we can understand what kind of application this is. So using the terminology, etc., we will learn what kind of application. So the initial classification is application type classification. So we have understood that it's a warehouse application. And the next level of classification is control type, where we have, where using the web scraping, now the entire DOM is categorized or classified into control types. It could be buttons, it could be text fields, it could be drop downs. So you classify them into several classes. And then you come to the page object classification. So there what we do is your entire web application is classified into page objects. For example, a login page object or a registration page object. So this entire classification is called multi-class classification, and there are already written algorithms for that. So what we want to do is we want to reuse an existing algorithm without writing our own, but we will have to do some customizations for that. And yes, so the next level is, now that we have enough data via web scraping, now we have classified them as well. Now what we are going to do is we are going to generate test cases. So initially, we will be creating control validation test cases. So for this, we use our reinforcement algorithm will be creating test cases autonomously. And for example, I think to explain to you in an example is better. So in this context where, let's say you have a login UI, and then you have a text field called username. So what our algorithm will do is it will autonomously create test cases such as verify maximum length against username text field. So now you will wonder where these verifications are coming from. So that's why I have mentioned here, it is a rule engine plus reinforcement learning combination. So the rule engine is the one where we know if it's a button type control, then we perform a click action. So those kinds of actions are fed into the algorithm so that it knows what to do at each level. So we have a rule engine as well as ML reinforcement learning algorithm. So both of these will work together and create control validations. Not only that, it will also create control validation test data. For example, for you to identify a test case, you need test data as well to execute it, right? So what our model will do is it will create test data, random test data. For example, if your maximum length for this particular text field is, let's say, 20 characters, it will try bombarding your application with 256 characters, maybe 0 characters, maybe 50 characters. And then it will, by using reward and penalty, it will understand what is the best test case that will not produce a penalty. So like that, it will autonomously create control validation data as well. Let's quickly go back to our concept model. And next I'll talk about how we create UI verification, UI validation test cases. So for that, initially, you will have to have something called the baseline UI. For example, what we are doing is we are creating GUI tests, right? So in that case, you need a baseline UI. For example, you can use your wireframes, maybe your InVision UIs, which are exactly the same as what you expect your web application to be. It has to be typically the same. So you input that as your baseline UI. And using a technology called computer vision, which is very common in machine learning, using computer vision algorithms, what we do is we also have the input from the web scraping algorithm where we have the entire DOM and we take snapshots of our web application. So what we do is the computer vision algorithm will compare your baseline with your actual application snapshots and tell you whether you're at the right path. And that's when it will provide UI verification test results. It will also give you the test cases and give you test results as well. That's the level of GUI test cases. Thirdly and finally, let me talk about how we create functional test cases. So from the similar concept, what we do is we derive something called the functional flows. So now we have the page objects, we have what are the controls, and we also know through the reinforcement learning algorithm what are the actions that a particular component can handle, a particular control type. So for example, if it's a login page, now the functional flow would be adding a username, password, and clicking on the login button. That would be one functional flow. So one output of this model is the functional flows. And we also have the control validation test data that I mentioned earlier, where we have understood what is the best input that we can put to these test cases. So these two inputs are added to something called a conversion model, where we convert those test cases into scripts. So how we can do that is we actually put IDs or tags to all our control types, which we have picked out from here. And we also have already created the page object classes. So we have the necessary details to create the script. So we autonomously create the script as well. And so the output would be functional automated scripts. So this entire unit is how we create functional test cases. So these are the main three concepts behind our framework. If you have any questions later on, you can post them to me. So let's move on as we have a limited time frame. All right, so as you know now, autonomous testing is not a new word in the industry. There are many existing autonomous testing tools. They are mostly commercial tools. So there are many challenges that we faced when it comes to building our own tool. Initially, the expert consultation or building the model, the conceptual model, we had to discuss with our data science experts, our machine learning and AI experts within the company to decide what is the best tool that we can do a POC or a proof of concept on. So that was initially the first challenge. And then the emphasis on the ROI. So we have to prove something, even to write a POC, we have to know that this is going to give us some return, right? So why do we have to go beyond automated testing into autonomous testing? So that was something that we had to show in terms of ROI. So that was a difficult part and a challenging part for us. And next, actually, even the time and resource investment for the POC. So this was not funded by any party. So the company had to get everyone together, and we had to discuss with a lot of people to come up with the model. So that initial investment was also challenging. And lastly, the fear of the new. This is something common to all human beings, where we are reluctant to move forward. We are afraid of the word. We think that we don't know. So we are afraid to take up the challenge. So that was something that was difficult as well for us to emphasize the importance of moving forward from automated testing. So those were the main challenges. So finally, I want to talk about what are the outcomes of the framework, and overall, what are the outcomes of my presentation today for the audience. So initially, you have to understand that the industry is going to evolve, and it's not that manual testing or automated testing is going to be obsolete, but there is a time where we have to move forward and embrace the future. So because of that, the reason behind doing that is the return on investment that we are expecting. So increased ROI is very promising when it comes to autonomous testing. Even if you use a commercial tool, the initial investment is going to be huge, but the return is going to be vast because your test generation as well as maintenance can be done autonomously. And the coverage. So like I showed you with an example, the test cases that we can generate are huge. The number of test cases are enormous. So there is no limit. There is no way that a human being can write that amount of test cases. Even if we do exploratory testing, we are not going to be able to identify that many test cases. So the coverage is going to be huge. And our output, one of the main outputs are UI and validation test cases, as well as functional test cases. And also UI test execution results. Like I said, we will be constantly comparing the base URL, rather the base UI, the wireframes, with your actual application. So the computer vision algorithms will continuously give you an execution and tell you whether your UI is up to the base UI standard. And also, like I mentioned to you, we will be able to release automated functional test scripts as well. You can select the language that you want to write your tests in, whatever the familiar language, and we will be able to convert that into that kind of test classes and test methods. That summarizes the end of my presentation. And I hope you gathered something really important and that this time was valuable to you. So for questions, the SLASCOM team will share with you the relevant details to post questions. Please don't hesitate to nudge me and ask any questions as well. Thanks a lot for your time. Ajmal, over to you.
Thank you very much, Menaka. That was Menaka De Silva, who spoke to us on her particular topic, which was shifting gears towards autonomous testing. Thank you so very much that you guys, everybody, our participants are connected into Colombo Test Automation Virtual Conference 2020, CTAC 2020. We've just finished the second talk by Menaka. Coming up is the third one. We have two speakers in tandem who will deliver this particular segment. But before that, I'd like to remind everyone, all our participants who are logged in, that we have shared a link through the chat. I'm just going into the chat. Yep, I can see it. Tarindra has shared it with all the participants, the bit.ly link, so you can click on that link, go and post your question. We will take up all the questions that come from you towards the end of the session. So if you do have any questions, please go hit this link and send it through to us. We are keen on getting questions and answering them towards the end, because then it definitely does concretely put in place and emphasize a two-way communication. Coming up next is going to be a topic which is about continuous performance and engineering, continuous performance engineering and beyond. To do that, we have two speakers who will do that for us. First of them is Tarindu Piris, who's an associate tech lead in quality and tech engineering and internal tools at Cambio Software Engineering. Tarindu has over 5 years of industry experience in software engineering and currently holding a technical leadership of Cambio Test Automation Framework and its internal tools. Prior to Cambio, he has worked in LSF as a research engineer. He has completed his MSc in computer science from the University of Colombo. Also, along with him, in tandem to deliver this presentation or this talk on continuous performance engineering and beyond, we have Ranil Veerasinghe, Head of Quality Assurance at Cambio Software Engineering. Ranil, well, of course, has more than 12 years of industry experience in quality engineering, specialized in performance engineering. Ranil currently holds the position of Head of Quality at Cambio Software Engineering, responsible for automation and performance. Prior to Cambio, he has worked in Virtusa and Pearson Lanka. These are the two gentlemen who will take you through this segment of continuous performance and engineering, and of course beyond that. So I'd like to call upon Ranil Veerasinghe and Tarindu Piris to take this session forward.
Good afternoon, everybody. So yeah, it is nice to see a large gathering here. Let me introduce myself. As I said, as Ajmal expert, I'm Ranil Veerasinghe and Tarindu Piris. We are from Cambio Software Engineering. Plus, allow me to give a very brief introduction about the Cambio Software Engineering. We are into the healthcare domain industry. When it's come to the leading player, when it's come to the Nordic region, where Sweden and Norway region, and also expanding in the UK region as well. So when it's come to this Cambio software system, it is being used by across 170,000 users right now in different institutions when it's come to healthcare sector. When it's come to the performance, is a paramount thing, because since we are in the sector of dealing with the patient healthcare, in that case, it is a very paramount thing. So what we are going to discuss is, we had some challenges in delivering a performance, better performance engineering process, having continuous performance engineering aspect. So we are going to discuss in Cambio aspect through a use case, how we have derived in next slides. So, okay, as you can see, out of 4 cars, if I ask, okay, which car is has better performance? In that case, Okay, I will get the Akshay to answer you because to read your mind. Yeah, I think all of you agree with me that the blue color car, which is the Ford Mustang, that is the sporty wise, has very good performance. So then the next questions come, why it has that kind of a better performance? Because it is inbuilt with the engineering aspect, because even though other cars have same interior and exterior, but to be significant and having a better performance car, it has built upon with engineering aspect embedded. So when it comes to the performance test process also, it is the same. And if we talk about the performance test process for the continuous performance engineering, most of the companies, or most of the companies, it is challenging to derive a performance engineering performance test process having better continuous performance engineering aspects built into that. So because all the KPIs and all the concepts are there, by connecting them together, it is very challenging to derive a continuous performance engineering process. So what we are going to discuss in Cambio context, how we derive a continuous performance engineering process by connecting all the pieces in terms of the performance indicators, tools, and the other concepts what we have. Okay, in Cambio context, Cambio Cosmic is one of our systems what we have. This is the system where we had a business challenge. This system is built on, it has heavy code logics in the client side, which means on the UI side, some people refer, it has heavy code logics. It can create a bad performance use experience on the users, especially for the patients and the nurses who are using it. And on top of that, this particular system is built on top of monolithic application, but our systems has two aspects, built on monolithic and built on HTML5, which is a web on top of web as well. Then we had these two challenges. We need to derive a proper performance engineering process to tackle these two challenges what we have. Then apart from that, then we thought, okay, then we need to find a tool. Then we need to find we need to derive a mechanism to measure the KPIs, key performance indicators, and thereafter we need to simulate different types of like want to measure performance of the client side, and apart from that, like engineering test to measure okay, in terms of resources like memory, how it is behaving. So then we find out, okay, these are the things that we need to first identify. We have identified these things to derive a performance testing process. Then we went to the other step of, okay, where do we start? Then we had two options from the scratch. That means then we identify, okay, what are the things that we need to collect in order to derive a performance testing process. And we can start from the scratch after spending time on the resources and tool and doing the deriving the scripts from the scratch likewise. And other option what we saw is through a business process reengineering process, which means, look, we wanted to take a step back and look at our ecosystem and find out, okay, what are the things that we can reuse to derive better performance engineering aspects, since we have identified the performance, what are the components that we need to derive performance testing process, like tools, KPIs, like right? What we have in our ecosystem, which best serves to, which suits to derive to solve our problem. Then, okay, we just went through our internal ecosystem. Then we identified, okay, we have the internal tool, in-house built tool called can be use a transaction statistics to capture client-side performance layer, because as you remember, it was one of the objective or thing that we want to make sure. We have a tool for that. Then apart from that, functional automated suite to simulate client-side code. That means we need to simulate our scenarios, performance scenarios. For that, we have a functional automated suite because we need to simulate it via UI. That means through the GUI. Then because otherwise, again, on top of that, we need to derive different types of test suites. For example, regression performance test suite, which we will discuss a bit later. In that case, we say, okay, that is, and we need to execute in different versions as well. This was the candidate. Then we saw, okay, we can reuse them. Apart from that, for the performance engineering process, performance testing process, we need, okay, isolate test environment to execute the tests, and then test execution process to continuously test in order to have continuous performance engineering process, and results visualization tool, that is to get performance decisions. Okay, then in that case, we thought, okay, now up to now, what we have discussed was we have collected the components to derive a performance testing process. Then how we can derive the performance engineering strategy, performance engineering process on top of that, because we need to inbuild or embed the performance engineering aspects. With that, we have derived a model where, starting from the non-functional requirement up to once the our system is sent to the production environment, we do production monitoring. With that, again, it is a recurrent process, iterative process, where we again get the information from the production, and it is a continuous process. With that, we again continuously measure our performance of our product or features, and then enhance the performance of our features. For that, we have derived this kind of model. Irrespective of all the technologies and the tools what they are using, we believe this is something for other companies also, for your challenges also. You can use this model. We are going to discuss in next slides, okay, how we have used and what are the aspects inbuilt in each stage of our model to derive a continuous performance engineering strategy. First, we start with the non-functional requirements. Why we need non-functional requirements? Because we want to simulate real user performance-centric scenarios. For that, we need to collect performance-centric information to model a better performance strategy. In that case, with the engineering aspects, we wanted to, we came up with a kind of a criteria. Okay, in order to derive performance scenarios, they need to come in the non-functional requirement aspect, because for anything, functional, if we have to start a functional testing or develop something, we need to start with the requirement. So then the non-functional requirement has to be derived, and we came up with some criteria where response time, SLAs, concurrent user load, and data structures, like the data structure, data involved, that means the particular scenario, if that scenario has a lot of data, that what's the data volume involved with that when it's being used by the real users. And when it's come to your production environment, where this particular application is hosted, our application hosted, how many number of servers are there, all those non-functional requirements are, we need to better model our performance test strategy. That is the engineering part that we want to embed when it's come to the deriving the non-functional requirements. Then we have all the information to derive the performance test strategy. Then the second step is performance test environment. Okay, why we need a performance test environment here? Because we need to simulate the, as I mentioned, user scenarios as much as possible in a realistic way, in order to understand the performance, and if there are performance issues are there, to capture them. In that case, we need to simulate them in a better performance environment. In our case, with the challenges we had, it was a difficulty to derive an identical environment, which we find in the production or live environment, to be simulate, or rather having in the test environment. It was a very expensive task as well. In that case, we had the problem, okay, how we can derive, because we need to simulate the real user scenarios. And in that case, we have to have a better performance, or rather the real user centric production environment. In that case, we went for the option of, we derived the isolated test environment, but it is a scaled down environment of the production environment. Then how we scaled it down to the, when we are deriving the when we are deriving a test environment, which is a testing environment. How we derive it? We went with a kind of, there are a lot of scientific ways are there, but we went with a very small, we went with a very simple way of having a 1/3 ratio of that means based on the ratio for our case, what was 1/3 of live environment. In example, it is if your live environment has 9 application servers, then derive a 10 three application servers to your test environment. Likewise, we scale it down in the 1/3 ratio, but it is not the same case with the your organization. Sometimes if you have the luxury to have the identical environment, that is awesome. And not only that, sometimes there are some companies who deal with the AWS technologies. They can spin up environments very quickly. In that case, they can go with identical. But in our case, we went with the 1/3 ratio. Special thing what we want to stress here is here we went with the that means in terms of the hardware and software, what we see in the production environment, for example, memory, CPU, cores, and everything should be there in identical manner in your test environment, not in terms of number of servers, but in terms of hardware and software configurations. Then you can have a better environment which is comparable to the your tested your live environment. And other thing that you have to make sure here is if you scale it down your environment like that, if you want to simulate, let's say in production, if you have 1,000 or 900 users, then you have to scale down that user load to be executed in this environment with that ratio as well. Okay. Then let's that is how we derive the through the performance engineering aspects, how we derive the better performance environment. Then next step is deriving the realistic performance scenarios. So because as we said, we need to simulate realistic performance scenarios. In that case, how we can derive a realistic performance scenario? That was the question. What are the criteria? By looking at the performance engineering aspects and with the expertise we have, then we came up with some criteria. Yes, when you are selecting the business scenario, it should be a business critical scenario. It could, for us, it was the patient registration. Without that, we cannot do anything. Likewise, we can, based on the business criticality, and if it should be a scenario where simulates the real user workflows and the user load, the usage of that particular scenario. If it is high usage, that is a candidate for to be executed or take as a realistic performance scenario. And then the technical, there could be some scenarios where technical complexity based, if there could be a messaging queues like this, even though they are not highly using, but technically it is a backend system, it should be very stable every time. If they are, even though there is no high usage, that kind of scenarios are also candidate to verify, okay, whether it is a realistic performance scenario that we need to look at. Based on these parameters, we derived, okay, what are the scenarios that we need to look at. How we got this information is through the analytics tool what we have in the production. In your case, also through if you have application performance monitoring tools in your production environment, yes, that is a very good candidate. You can take, otherwise through the IIS logs or the logs what you have through databases, you can derive those information. Then, as I was telling, then for our scenario, we have all the realistic scenarios and all the scenarios we have identified. We have come up with a mechanism to that. Then we thought, okay, we have in our environment, in our ecosystem, function automation suite. Through that, we can execute our scenarios, and then we can capture the performance indicators like response time, like those things via the inbuilt tool called CATS, can be used transaction statistics. By combining that, then we say, okay, we can collect the performance results. But when it's come to the your cases, depend on your nature of the thing you are going to address, it could be a JME tool or kind of a test, what we, or rather tool, what you can choose. Then let's go to the next one. Okay, then we want to execute the test. Our testing process is, because we're going to continuously test our products. So in that case, in our engineering process, when it's on the test aspect part, then what we want to execute is that when it's on the team level, at the time of the features completing, at that time through method level profiling and DB profilings, we can understand, okay, if there's a performance issue is there, we can identify. For that, we have tools and infrastructures there. For example, if a particular method is given high time, multiple calls are deriving when it's come to the a particular if condition is getting executed, if it is taking high time. Likewise, we can make sure then we can early identify the performance issues. It is the same case for the DB profiling. Through stored procedure traces, we can identify if there is a DB query which is taking high time, which we want to that we want to try out, or rather it is in this kind of shift left testing, where the early we going to find it is early feedback loop, and we can rectify them at the development time itself. Thereafter, then we came up with the approach. Yes, after that, when the feature is completed, when it comes the team environment, in our particular team is they are owning a particular model, they have a dedicated environment, a pre-staging environment with low data combinations. They can execute performance, because through our automation test, through it, they can derive a performance scenario, and it can be integrated with through tagging as performance. They can tag it as performance, then it can be put in the Jenkins pipeline, and it will triggered after a code merge, and it executes. And then we provide the infrastructure, like we giving performance dashboard to compare performance indicators to make performance decisions by the teams itself. So that is the strategy what we have derived when it comes to the team level. Thereafter, in the staging environment, where with all the integrations, all the code merges are, because from the several modules, code merges are, because they do different code changes. Once they make those code changes, how our, as a product whole, how the performance is, we need to verify the performance. In that case, then we derive another one in the staging environment. We have a performance regression suite. We derived it after the NFR, and after derived, as we said, based on the criteria we explained earlier. Then it is getting executed after the code merge nightly through the CI/CD pipeline, and then performance regressions would get executed, and then visualize the performance indicators for different stakeholders. So this is another layer of continuously test after the team level, and then staging before it releases. Then continuously this happens. Since it has been embedded with CI/CD pipeline, likewise, then you can get early feedback early. However, this whole thing, it is not implemented fully in our organization right now at the moment. But this has, we have derived the mechanism and tools, all the infrastructure and the capabilities to make it happen right now, because we have tested it internally. For my colleagues from our company, you can tell it. So it is kind of a secret. So this is ready to roll out. So this is the approach, but how we are kind of encouraging, or rather we have proposed in our model when it comes to testing, to continuous test performance. So that is up to now. I have kind of in our performance engineering process, how we have derived from the NFR to environment, or what are the aspects that you look at in terms of performance engineering aspect, and how we have derived it, and the test how we are continuously doing, I have explained you. So another one key thing, one thing is because we are talking about doing performance tests for the UI, but there's another aspect we do for the server side that it is out of the scope, but it is similar pattern what we are kind of going to implement for that aspect as well. So from this point onwards, Taridu will give you introduction of the process what we talked about, testing process with the tools, what tool stack, how it is happening really. He will give understanding, and he will walk through you up to the in our analysis and production monitoring stage, and give you a brief idea about how it is happening and how it is going to be. Taridu, over to you, Taridu.
Okay, thank you, Ranil. And yes, now you can see some complete idea about what kind of technical implementation we have in the Cambio. To as Ranil explained before, it is a methodology, and we are following that one. This is the technical architecture, technical workflow of the entire analysis process. And mainly, it is a nightly scheduled job, so it will run within the 1 night period, and it will do. Here we are showing it the one environment, but it is a parallel environment. So basically the basic idea that we are using two operators, one as a Jenkins pipeline operator and another Apache NiFi as a data flow operator. So based on those two operators, we are doing the entire performance analysis, performance test execution. We create the environment as we discussed before. According to the Ranil explanation, we are creating a valid sample environment similar to the production, and based on that one, we are top of that environment. We are set up the Cosmic. That's the main product with the particular version, and we are set up the cards. Customer Cosmic user transaction statistic profiler, and also Cambio test automation framework. Those are the key things we are set up in that one based on the Jenkins. After that one, we do the test execution and collect all the data. In here, especially, we are keeping all the records of environment and system related matrices also. So we have data, mainly we are keeping data in relational databases, and also we have some data in file-based databases. So we are using that data, we are doing the analysis, and we will describe in the next slide with the details. When we come to the analysis stage, and okay, when we move to that one, the analysis is, we have multiple layer approach. Now we come to this analysis, we have mainly four kind of data. We have CTAC, that's mean Cosmic Test Automation Framework related data that's up to test level, test scenario level, and we have cuts data that's related to the transaction level, and also we have system matrices, especially with the Prometheus databases, and we have those data, and also we are keeping some set of data. I will explain that one later, but in roughly we are keeping we call it post-production monitoring informations. We are keeping those data also in here. Those are data that we collected in the production level. So those are all the data that we have at the moment, and after that one, what is the expectation at the end of this analysis stage is we want to address different perspective with the similar kind of analysis. So basically, such as we want to give a performance visualization for admin or business level perspective, and also we need to give this visualization for team level with a more technical manner, and also we need to go with the transaction level for with the developer perspective. So those are the key level that we are maintaining, and we had to address each stakeholders with the proper visualization. So that is the challenge, and for that one we are using three different kind of tools. Mainly we are using a template based visualization, especially with the Power BI and Grafana. Main reason is we need a fast forward visualization. When the text execution complete, immediately this template based visualization appear with all the complete visualization. So very fastly we can go forward with that one. That is almost cover in the moment in our Cambio context. And also in some special scenarios, we had to go with the more deep analysis. So we need to freedom for that one. So we are playing with the data based on the Jupyter notebooks, and we are set up that one so we can access any data sources through the Jupyter, and based on the Python we can do any kind of analysis. Especially we are doing some analysis for the research purposes. We are working with several research. I will explain that one later, but in here we are doing some machine learning level experiments to get a clear idea about the patterns and improve this performance into the next level. When we move to the next slide, we can get an sample idea about what kind of data visualization we are having. And this is the one example. This is a Grafana dashboard, one dashboard that we are using for the performance analysis. Not actually a particular one dashboard. This is a set of widget we collected from the several dashboards. The key thing is I want to highlight the performance analysis is not just a value or threshold based analysis. It is a mostly with the nature of comparison. So we are proceeding with that approach. we are always compare one performance execution with the another performance execution mostly, and for that one we are keeping the baseline after change method. Baselines are the benchmark execution that we have some idea about the much more stable performance executions, and we are keeping those benchmarks. And when new performance execution happen, our dashboard immediately do the visualization compare with the previous benchmarked baseline. If you go with the each widget, you can see that based and after change, those are the key environment, and we are comparing with each other. So that is the idea. And also here we are doing some hierarchical analysis. We are starting from the namespace and we are moving to the transaction level. Even after the transaction level, that's the conceptual atomic level in our case, but we are drill down that one into the four parts also: the client, server, and DB and networks. So those kind of deep level analysis we can reach in this level also, but we are doing the same much more deep analysis based on our Jupyter notebooks. We are also doing that one. If we move to the next slide, I can give some idea about the post-production monitoring. I explained a little bit about before. The post-production monitoring is at the end of this analysis, we are not completing the performance test, because at the production level even we are doing this monitoring part and we are collecting informations. But in the Cambio context, we are dealing with the health related data. Those are very sensitive data, so there are certain limitations to address those environments. So but under those certain limitations, we are doing some level of post-production monitoring, and we are collecting data, we are collecting user feedbacks, and we are collecting all the related informations and feedback them into the next test performance analysis. So that is the one key part in our approach, and it is a iterative approach. This is continue and iteratively continue. So when we go to the next slide, we will give some idea about what kind of research level things we are doing in the Cambio to uplift this current performance analysis into next level. Mainly we are doing a lot of research in that area, but I will focus on a few things. One thing is automated performance approval approach. uh, I told that this is the nightly scheduled job, and in the morning we want to get a full report with all the highlighted points, and we want to get a clear idea about what kind of performance behavior we can see. It should be a fully automated one, and we are working for that level. And also another thing, that performance scripts are very sensitive in here, that can make a huge impact to the analysis. So we are working for performance script to maintain those as a self-healing manner, and it is a real challenge. So but we try to maintain that one with the higher stability, so we are working for that one also. And as a final one, the AI based pattern detection, pattern analysis. Yes, we had to do some level that there are multiple reasons. One thing is we are not giving a one-to-one mapping with the production environment and test environment, so we had to rational environment. So based on that one, we had to get a rough forecast about what kind of CPU usage or memory usage or system behaviors we can see in the production level based on this sample. So in that level of forecasting, we are using some level of machine learning techniques, and also we are doing some level of analysis for special behaviors also. If we go to the next slide, I will come to the conclusion of the presentation, and this is the core idea behind our use case scenario. It is a continuous and iterative process. If I conclude the session, we are starting from the non-functional requirement. In here, we are focusing about what kind of behavior we want to test. That's the main idea. When we move to the environment, it is a tailor-made realistic performance environment. We call it test bed, and it is a valid sample for the production level. And after that one, we move to the performance test suite, and it is a realistic performance metric scenarios. We are filtering out that one and according to our requirements. And we move to the next thing. It is the testing process. It is a team-driven shift left and continuous testing. After the testing, we are collecting all the information and then move to the analysis stage. It is the key idea behind that one, what we can see and why we can see that one. That is the idea behind the analysis stage. After the analysis, the process is continue. When we come to the production level, we are keeping records and we are collecting informations and feedbacks those information into the next performance test cycle. That's the idea behind. And yes, that is the conclusion of our presentation. Hope you get an idea about what kind of things we are doing in performance analysis under the Cambio context. So hope you get an idea about that one. And thank you very much for the time, and hope you can ask if you have any, if you need any clarification or correction, you can ask that one, and we are happy to answer it with the QA session at the end. And thank you very much from the Cambio end.
Well, thank you so much to the both of you, Tarindu and Ranil from Cambio Software, who did a fabulous job in taking us through the topic that they were destined to do, which is continuous performance engineering and beyond. Thank you so much for the insight that both of you brought in together, testing the process, which was not something Ranil started off with early. Later in, we went in to talk about deep level analysis, performance engineering, and of course, going beyond that line. And thank you so very much for the nutshell that you gave us towards the end of the session that had a complete view of literally most of the highlighting things that you did want to speak about. We are at the end of the third talk. We are going to go into our first break. But before that, a quick summary of what has happened today. From the first three sessions, we had a keynote speaker coming up first, talking about his area in terms of design. Where he spoke of patterns, correcting patterns, the value of the nature of kind of weights and all that, the kinds of weights that would have been there, insights into decorator patterns, of course, and several other interesting topics that he picked up on speaking, following which we had Menaka, who came up, did absolute justice to 30 minutes. He started off getting us to ponder on the ROI and how effective is it to do automated testing. Interesting approaches to testing is something that she also did speak of. Discussion on the tools, the frameworks, and the models, and she absolutely, crystallized on some of the challenges that we do really face in terms of automated testing. Following which, of course, we had the last two, Ranil and Tarindu, speaking to us on their particular topic, which all this has crystallized a very good first half of this particular conference. CTAC 2020, some absolute rock solid concrete information shared in the first half. We are going into a break now, but however, it is going to be a very engaging break because we have Tarindra who's going to come on. Tarindra is going to steal the show for the next 10 minutes or so. Tarindra Jayamana, who's a quality forum head at SLASCOM and also a quality assurance architect at 99X. He's got a bit of an act to do over the next 10 minutes. It's going to be engaging. I want all of you to share a lot of attention to that and participate. It's going to be a quiz, not many questions, all to do with automated testing. And we will have a winner at the end. So you'll walk off becoming the winner of the quiz in this CTAC 2020. So make sure you participate and be engaged in what's going to happen in the next 10 minutes and the rest of the show as well. Tarindra, over to you.
Thank you, Ajmal. Hope I am audible to you. You can hear me?
Yeah, absolutely. I can hear you.
Cool. Awesome. So I will not take much time because we are kind of ready to start the next session and you want to have some break as well. So during the intermission, we would like to give you an opportunity to participate a particular quiz and see how you guys gonna attempt it and score. So the winner will be kind of getting a gift voucher. So I would like you to invite to join this particular link that you can see in the screen, which is slido.com. And either you can use the QR code or the ID that you have, you can see in the screen. So let me, okay. But other thing is, I would like to remind you when you're joining, put your first name and the last name as well, because we are going to, as I mentioned, we are going to give you a gift if you are the winner. So in order to identify the winner, we would like to kind of have names there. So I can see a lot of guys are getting joined. 12, 14. 39, 40, 43, getting increased. Are we ready to start the quiz? I can see still some guys are joining. If we are exceeding 100, I would have to join, start another link. So don't worry if you are unable to join, because the maximum participants we can have is 100. But I can see it's getting increased. Let me check. Yep. Okay, shall we start then? I think, okay, what you can do is, what happens is now that I'm going to start the quiz. Once you start the quiz, you will be able to see the questions in your screen and in my screen as well. If you are using your mobile, you can see the questions there, and as well as in the screen here also. So, so each after you will be getting a 30 seconds to answer each question. So within 30 seconds, you have to answer it, and the winner will be the fastest finger. So let me start it. Hope all of you are ready. Okay, I can see still joining. So let's start without ado. Right. Here's the question. 30 seconds. You have to answer. Four seconds. 3, 2, 1. Yes. Okay, most of the guys have answered saying integration with the CI tool, 59%. And the second is that continuous test execution. Let me see the answer. Yes, the correct answer is the first answer. Let me see the leaderboard now. WN Silva is leading. Still you have chances. Let's see. So I'm moving to the next question. Get ready, answer correctly and quickly. Okay, here we go. Okay, right. So most of you have answered saying skilled and experienced resources. Hope you have read the question correctly. Which of the following is not a prerequisite for automation testing? So you can check whether which is required. So let me check the answer. The answer is test scripts. The leaderboard. Shihani Kaushalya is leading. Let me go to the next question.
Wrong number කියලා තියන්න ඔහෙ.
I would like
අයිති number එකක් තියන්නකො මේ phone එක.
I would like the participants to mute their phones. So I mean speakers. Okay. Yes. So we have two answers which are kind of having kind of closer votings. So robust object identification and easy integration with tools. Let us see the correct answer. Yeah. The answer is easy integration with CI tools. So this is kind of a priority wise they had put. And so then out of these, what's the least priority? Okay, let's go to the leaderboard. Okay, Ratnayaka. Let me go to the next question. Hold on. Okay, we have got three answers. That is our spec, Concordian, and Vatir. How would see the correct answer is the second answer. Yeah, the leaderboard. I will be just rushing through the things because we are running out of the time. Ayodhini Mutuarachi has taken the first place. Let's see how it goes. The next question. Hold on. Yeah. Sorry, my bad. I double clicked here. Which of the following is not a valid reason for automating a test case? Yes, let's see the answer. Okay, let's see the leaderboard. Udar Rajapaksha is leading the board now. Let me go to the next question. Let's see the correct answer. Yes. Let me see the leaderboard. Samadhi Vandana is leading now. Quickly going to the next question. Okay. Let's see the correct answer. Yep. Leaderboard. Samadhi Vandana still leading the board. Going to the 8th question. Yes, let's see the answer. Yes, correct. 4th one. Let's see the leaderboard. Himali Udayangani is leading now. Last 2 questions. 9th question. All right. So we have got the answer 3 from most of the audience. So let's see what the answer is. Yes, correct. The leaderboard. Samadhi Vandana. The last question. Okay, let's see who's gonna be the winner of the quiz now. Yep. Hold on. Sorry. Yep. Okay, that concludes the 10 questions we had, and let's see the correct answer. Yes, the last one was the answer. And the leaderboard, Ayodhni Muthuarachi has won the entire quiz. So she had answered 7 out of 10 questions correctly and taken only 3 minutes and 25 seconds. The hardest question was, which of the following is not a prerequisite for automation testing? That only 18% of the attendees were able to answer. Ayodhini, this is for you. Can you put me a message privately in Zoom so maybe we can contact you and find a way to give out the gift voucher that we have planned for this quiz? So it's over to you, Ajmal. Maybe I think guys might need a break, maybe 2 or 3 minutes. Over to Ajmal. Yeah.
All right, thank you so very much, Tarindra, and congratulations to Ayodhni Muthuarachi for being the winner of this pop quiz during the break. What we would do is, like Tarindra suggested, the time now locally at Colombo is 3:34 p.m. Let's go in for about a 3-minute break because we are slightly behind time, and try and start things a little before 3:40. I'm thinking of doing it by about 3:37, 3:38. You get a breather and come back. So we're going to go on a mute, maybe a bit of a pause time now for the next 3 to 4 minutes. Come back a little before 3:40. So we look at targeting a good start again for our second half. We have all our speakers lined up, ready to deliver their content. So let's await that coming to you in the next couple of minutes. Break time now. Thank you so much.
Do you know the technology we put behind getting food on your plate? Digitized consumer journeys and dynamic pricing calculated on the cloud? There's reactive cloud infrastructure and variable technologies that connect directly to inventory and warehouse management systems. We build enterprise and middleware platforms and machine learning-driven geo-routing technologies. We serve customers with e-commerce platforms for restaurants and consumers running on data-optimized UX systems. And that barely covers it. We are an innovator for Cisco, the world's leading food service company. Cisco Labs, unlimited technologies, endless opportunities, transforming food service.
making change tomorrow with a range of leading business software solutions. CAMS offers a full range of solutions in governance, risk and compliance, strategy execution, project and portfolio management, talent management, meeting management, and flexible workflow services, as well as real-time reporting and insights. You have the flexibility to use what your business needs. One solution, two solutions, or bundle them all together for a complete business solution. Easy to use, industry recognised and intuitive, you'll get buy-in from your whole team. Our solutions are available out of the box, rapidly deployed for quick time to value, backed by a great CAMS team with 25 years experience, used all over the world by businesses of all kinds, and every solution is supported by CAMS College, offering next generation customer care and training. So if you want to make the right decisions, manage your risk, align your team, and focus on what matters, stay ahead with CAMS. Request your demo today.
Career choices are the way of defining your future success. Select the field that you want to excel and define a career path that inspires you to work with passion. We, as your guiding light, educate, empower and equip you with a solid foundation for a brighter future. Igniting creativity, assuring employability, technologically equipped, giving exposure to the real corporate world, and fueling personality development are some of the reasons why you should choose the best and graduate to shine. Choose Appit. Appit.
All right, welcome back everyone to our second session of CTAC 2020, where we will be heading into three separate dimensions of discussions. Coming up immediately after the break is our first speaker after the break, which is Madhuka Pereira. He'll be speaking on verifying machine learning and applications. Madhuka, of course, is the Associate Manager in Quality Engineering at Cisco Labs. He is a result-oriented quality analyst, I beg your pardon, with more than 8 years of experience in software, quality analysis, team management, and quality strategies for large-scale software systems. In this session today, Madhuka will elaborate on how the accuracy of delivery time windows was improved in a similar app through machine learning. From a quality engineering perspective, in today's session, we will also feature a holistic approach of its verification workflow and the usage of Python pandas along with scikit-learn libraries on JavaScript-based tool stack. To do all that, I'd like to invite Madhuka Pereira to take on. Madhuka, it's over to you for the next 30 minutes to tell us what you've got on store with regard to verifying machine learning applications.
Thank you very much, Ajmal. Hope you can see my screen and hope you can hear me well.
I can see your screen and hear you loud and clear as well.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the third session of the evening. So by now, I hope you might have a glimpse of what I'm going to talk about in this session. So before moving into the main topic of the session, I would like to walk you through a few interesting facts in terms of the industry that we are going to touch base with. So it's all about machine learning. So first things first, so have you ever noticed that machine learning is an industry with an impressive annual growth rate of 42%. And moving on, if you look at the job market of the United States, only 38% of the jobs are to be automated and replaced with AI-based technology in the next 10 years. So the question for us is, are we ready to take up with that challenge? And I'm sure you all might have walked down the lanes of software as a service, platform as a service, but up next is machine learning as a service. So with these three eye-opening quick facts about machine learning, I would like to quickly jump into the main topic, which is verifying machine learning applications. So I'm Madhuka Pereira, working for Cisco Labs as an Associate Manager, Quality Engineering. So during this session, I would like to talk about what we were trying to resolve. How did we resolve it through machine learning, and the entire verification approach that we followed, challenges we encountered, and few achievements. To get things started, what were to be resolved? So here I'll be talking about or giving you a brief intro about the problematic scenario that we encountered and how we resolve it through machine learning. So this application I'm going to talk about is all about a mobile application. It actually acts as an integral part of a large e-commerce platform. We call this application a delivery app because it tracks deliveries, an item that is being dispatched from a warehouse until it reaches the pre-identified destination. So I'm pretty sure that you might have come across several other delivery applications as such, be it Uber Eats, be it Pick Me Foods, or any other delivery application. So as soon as you order something, what is the first question that comes to your mind? I believe it's the estimated time of delivery. Or in other words, as soon as you order something, you might wonder, when will I be getting delivered this item? Or why is getting so late for me to get this item delivered? So those are the questions that would come to your mind in the first place. So in a technological world, we call it the estimated time of arrival, in short term, ETA. So similarly, in this application also, in the legacy approach, we retrieve several location-based information through different third-party vendors and try to predict the estimated time of arrival of a particular item. So that was the earlier approach. But having said that, we encountered so many difficulties in accurately predicting the final ETA. Why? Because if you look at a particular delivery or a delivery vehicle, it could be in two forms. Now, it could be at a stop or it could be on the move. But when you are on the road, you might face several difficulties. It could be a traffic congested situation, or it could be maybe a mechanical breakdown, or due to adverse weather conditions, so adverse driver patterns. So those are the reasons why we couldn't accurately predict the ETA in our legacy approach. So like I said earlier, we segregate this improvement of ETA, or the estimated time of arrival, into two. One is to improve the stoppage time, and the other one is to improve the travel time. So we thought if we can improve these two figures, we can very rightly or accurately predict the end result, which is the estimated time of arrival. So that's the entire approach, or that's the problematic scenario that we are trying to address in our approach. So moving on. Now, how we resolve it through machine learning. So that's before moving into detail with how we actually resolve it, just let's have a look at the basics that we practiced in terms of this entire approach. So in the first session, if you can remember, I think Menaka went through several types of machine learning approaches. In here, we actually used supervised regression approach. So what is a supervised learning approach? Now in this approach, we expected some parameters to be fed into a machine learning algorithm, expecting a particular output. Now, if you can remember, what we are trying to achieve here is to predict the stoppage time of a delivery so that we can rightly predict the estimated time of arrival for a given consumer. So in that case, we know our inputs and we know our outputs. So we retrieve several parameters of several location-based information from third-party vendors. We need to input that parameters into the machine learning algorithm, and we expect a time value for the stoppage time. So that's what our focus is on. And by nature, the supervised learning approach has two different flavors. One is classification, and the other one is regression. So when you need discrete outputs from a machine learning algorithm, you tend to use classification approach, whereas in our approach, we use regression, where we wanted to retrieve a time value, which is a continuously generated value from a machine learning algorithm. Now, this little diagram depicts you what I just explained. So you have a data set here, and you need to put it through a machine learning algorithm, and you need, you expect certain outputs. Either it could be in a classification manner, or either it could be a regression manner. So in here, if you expect it as a classification, you get discrete outputs. For example, it could be 1, 0 outputs. It could be true, false outputs. It could be two different colors likewise. But here in our approach, we used regression approach, which is a continuously generated value In our case, it's the stoppage time we expected. Now you know the approach that we were practicing, and now it's time for us to look at the exact algorithm that we used. So before moving to that algorithm part, what is an algorithm? It's a program that can learn from data and improve from experience without human intervention. So that's the simple definition of an algorithm. So in our approach, we actually used one of the most popular algorithm in the machine learning arena, which is the random forest algorithm. So what is random forest algorithm? It actually comprises with decision trees. So just like a normal forest, forget about the algorithmic part of it, just like a normal forest, you have normal trees, right? Similarly, in your random forest algorithm, you have trees, you don't have normal trees, instead you have decision trees. So each tree spits out a prediction class. In simple terms, each decision tree gives you a predicted output. So when you have multiple decision trees, you get multiple prediction classes, so multiple predicted outputs. So the prediction class with majority votes gets elected as the final result, final output. So that's how you derive a particular output through a random forest algorithm. Now this diagram depicts you what I just explained. Towards your left, you have the single decision tree with multiple decision levels. And towards your right, you have the random forest with multiple decision trees. And now here I have mentioned class 1 and class 2. That's the prediction class that you tend to derive. And the prediction class with majority votes gets selected as a final output. So that's how the algorithm works here. Now that you know the algorithm that we wanted to employ, and you know the machine learning approach that we want to employ, now it's time to train the model through the algorithm that we wanted. So here in this case, we use several simple steps to train the machine learning algorithm in the way we wanted. So if I may go down we first started with data classification. So now someone can call it as 70-30 rule, or if you can Google it, one would argue it could be 80-20. What's that? Now, we had the luxury of utilizing 6 months worth of historical production data for this training approach. So we took that 6 months worth of data, and out of which 70% of the data, we use it to train the machine learning model. And the remaining 30% we kept for testing purposes. One would use it as 80% training data and 20% test data. But having done a thorough analysis and given the business context, we thought we'd stick with 70-30 rule. And to do this data classification, we use Python Pandas, which is a very popular open source library. And we used scikit-learn to do the model training part. Now this diagram depicts you what I just explained. Now here you could see the master data set. Like I said earlier, we had the luxury of using 6 months worth of historical data from the production. And this is our 70% training data. This is our 30% test data. You do the classification through Python Pandas, and you train the model through scikit-learn, and you do the final accuracy evaluation for us to get a better understanding about the optimization. But if you don't get the accuracy ratings that we expected, you go back to basics, you do the training again, and come back with another result set. So that's how you train the machine learning model. Now that you know the approach, you know the algorithm, and you just trained your machine learning model. Now that you need to integrate this machine learning model into a more into a more interoperable testing framework or a verification process for us to get the system into production. So moving on, here comes the verification approach. From a quality engineering perspective, this is the, from a quality engineering perspective, this is where you need your highest attention. In order to do so, we relied on a very basic quality engineering principle, test oracle. So what exactly a test oracle is? It's a mechanism for determining whether a program has passed or failed. So in determining your program is passed or failed, we define these 3 pillars under test oracle, given the business context. Now the first pillar was a generator. We introduced a generator as a pillar, then the comparator, and then evaluator. So generator, we used it to simulate data for our verification approach, and the comparator to compare the test data set against the predicted values we obtained from the machine learning model. And then the evaluator. We use the evaluator to determine the compared result against the accuracy ratings that we wanted and to produce any accuracy ratings that we wanted. So moving on, now you have a trained model, but having a trained model is not enough for test continuation. Therefore, we had this, if you can remember, I said now we had the legacy application. Now we are trying to enhance that application with machine learning approach to predict a more accurate figure for the estimated time of arrival. So having that in mind, we introduced 3 different components into our existing framework. That is to tally up with the test oracle or the 3 pillars that I explained in the previous slide. So to tally up with the generator part, this is the first pillar, we introduced a mock server that is just to simulate the required dataset for our verification approach. And then we introduced another component to tally up with the comparator pillar, just to compare the test dataset against the predicted output that we receive from the machine learning model. And then comes the evaluator to validate the results as well as to visualize or generate graphical outputs in terms of the accuracy figures that we wanted. So these are the 3 components that we introduced into our existing framework. Moving on, now this is the framework that we used to automate our test. Forget about the automation layer and the framework layer. Just look at the numbered items, the red highlighted one. Number 1 is the mock server. It tallies up with the first pillar that I was mentioning, that acts as the generator part of it to simulate dataset for the verification approach. And it goes down, it connects with the microservices and go through the machine learning model, derive us results. So we introduce this number 2, the comparator, to compare the machine learning predicted results against the test results test data that we have. And we run those comparisons through a validator to generate graphical output that we wanted. So that's how we fulfilled achieving the 3 pillars that I was just mentioning on the test oracle. So we covered generator part as well as the comparator part, and then the validator or the evaluator part. Now, apart from the highlighted items, I'm sure you might have used various other frameworks to automate your test in your daily context. Just like that, this is where we automated all our tests. Now, if you, for example, if we are to execute all these tests manually, it took us about 6 to 8 man days. But with this framework, we could reduce it to 2 hours. And we could achieve 90% automation coverage through this framework as well. So this is kind of the heart of the verification process. Now let's look at our additions to the framework in detail. Now when you say mock server, it's a very simple tool based on modified NodeXpress server, and it has a nice little GUI, and it enables us dynamically creating endpoints with zero server level downtime, and simply we use it to mock REST APIs. And more importantly, it is a reusable plugin. So whenever you need to add a mock service to a different framework, it's just a plug and play for us. Now this tallies up with the first layer, as I mentioned earlier, or the first pillar, to simulate data, acts as the generator part of the first test oracle. So we combined number 2 and number 3 pillars, that is the comparator part as well as the evaluation part, into a single layer called machine learning data validator. So in here, we tend to read all the test data results through CSV files, and we fetch predicted data from the machine learning model, and we compare it, do adequate accuracy calculations, and get the graphical outputs or the accuracy ratings we wanted. Like I said earlier, for the previous component, this is also a reusable component. So up to now, this tallies up this fulfills the 3 pillars that I mentioned for the test oracle. Now we are going to see what accuracy figures we generate in order to come to a conclusion. Now these 3 accuracy figures we generated through tools to come up with certain conclusions. range accuracy, standard error calculation, and direct comparison. So what is range accuracy? Through the range accuracy, we got the variance of the accuracy as opposed to a percentage of the data set that we have as the test data. And when you come to standard error calculation, now these are globally available figures. It doesn't matter now when you are training a particular model or verifying a particular machine learning application, you don't have to generate all these three figures. One would do. And then comes the direct comparison. When direct comparison is a very simple approach, it basically compares the actual data set against the predicted data set and produces graphical outputs. Moving on with the range accuracy. Now, if you look at the first table and the first row, now we have obtained plus or minus 60% of accuracy rating. That is the variance of the accuracy for 83% of data that we used. Now, if you go to the last line, plus or minus 5% of accuracy, which is the highest accuracy, but we have obtained it for 10% of the data. Now, this is, we actually generated with dummy data for demo purposes. Now, what we should try to achieve here is, we need to get this 10% up to maybe 80% or 90%. So that's where we wanted to go. And if you, similarly, you can think of the mean absolute error or the standard error calculation methodologies. For example, let's say mean absolute error here, you see a value of 10, which is not good. Now, if you can keep this around 2 or 3, then we have a better accuracy. So that's our ultimate target. And when it comes to the direct comparison, it's very simple. Now, if you look at the second graph, it's a basic scatter graph with actual and predicted data. If you look at the first graph, you see drastic fluctuations in certain points. That gives the sense that you need further optimizations to a machine learning approach or machine learning algorithm. So that's how you come to a conclusion whether your approach is correct or not. If we don't get the expected output here, we go back to basics, we train the machine learning model with further optimizations and come back here. So that's how the approach works. Now, if I may summarize what we have done up to now. Initially, we selected the specific approach or specific machine learning approach. In here, we use supervised regression approach. And then if you can remember, through Python pandas, we did data classification. And through scikit-learn, we trained the model. And if you can remember the 70-30 rule that was there, with 70% training data and 30% we used to test the trained model. And if you can remember the historical concept with the 3 pillars that I was mentioning, we enhanced our existing testing framework with three different components, the generator, comparator, and an evaluator. So we did all these things with the local data set, with the local setup we had. That's why we call this approach as the offline testing approach. So when I say offline testing approach, you might wonder what is the online testing approach. It's none other than a pre-production verification. So instead of simulated data, we basically retrieve data from the live production feeds. And we repeat the same other steps in the process itself. So again, with the live production data, we do the processing through the machine learning model, and then we do the comparison part with the actual data against the predicted data, and we do a evaluation with the results. So this is, we actually did this just before we go live with the system. So let me just summarize all these two approaches into a single diagram. Now I actually discussed during this session actually the key steps that we accomplished in achieving the final goal, but there are many steps as this diagram depicts. From the requirement analysis step, we we trained the model, and if you can remember the historical, we enhanced our test frameworks, we generated reports. If you find any bugs, go back to basics, do the regression cycles again, come back with zero defects, and then move forward with other verification methodology. So that's the entire verification approach in a nutshell that we use to accomplish our final results. Now that having said that, you might wonder, is that is it that simple? Didn't you come up with any challenges? Yes, we did. We did face a humongous amount of challenges. Just to mention few, determining the overall verification approach and the tech stack was really challenging because we were newbies to machine learning world, and we were working on different other projects, and this was very challenging. And pruning the random forest algorithm. Now, if you can remember, in the random forest algorithm, you have decision trees, you have multiple decision trees. In a single decision tree, you have multiple decision levels. So if you are someone who's familiar with gardening, you go out and you do the pruning to your normal trees. Just like that, for a decision tree, for a single decision tree, you have to maintain the decision levels you are capturing. Why? Because when you have a humongous amount of decision levels, it needs further processing power. So in order to leverage the resources that we have against the algorithm that we trained, we need to prune that. So it was a challenging task. We spent days in pruning the algorithm. Then comes the next tricky thing. It's to fine tune the parameters. Now, if you can remember, I was mentioning in my previous slides, we retrieve location-based data and other several data from third-party vendors. So let's say, for example, we retrieve 10, 15 parameters at once. And if we are to submit or feed all these parameters into the trained model and expect a good output, it won't work. Instead, we need to determine what are the highly impacting parameters to the final output we expect. So in that case, in a technological world, we call it hyperparameter optimization. It took days for us to figure out what are the highly impacting parameters for the output that we expected. Another challenge we concluded. And designing and developing the entire test framework with additional business logic itself was a challenging ask, but we accomplished it successfully as well. Having done all these, having gone through all these challenges and facing them successfully, onboarding live customers from a legacy approach to this new machine learning approach was the real challenge we faced. But having said that, I'll end my slide or the presentation here. We went live with 0 production leakages. Back then we had 100,000 plus consumers, and we were processing 300,000 plus deliveries per minute. And we hit 90% accuracy efficiency. So this gives you a glimpse of what we did and what we achieved in our context. That's it for this session. So thank you very much for listening. If you have any questions, you can just post it in the Google sheet that you got. And I'll try my level best to answer as many as possible questions in the little time that I'll be given towards the end of the session. Thank you very much, guys. Over to you, Ajmal.
Thank you so much, Madhuka, for that insightful view on verifying machine learning applications. Madhuka, of course, ladies and gentlemen, is the Associate Manager, Quality Engineering at Cisco Labs, and he did absolute justice with regard to his topic. Started off earlier in terms of classification of the data and the tests, the verification approaches that are recommended to use, and of course closed off with a comparison, and rightfully was very honest with the challenges that they faced, and obviously proud about what they've achieved at the end of that whole journey, which is one unique journey of itself. Quick shout out to our sponsors before we do head into our next session. As we've announced before, Platinum sponsor, Cisco Labs. We have our gold sponsors, Bistec Global, Apit and CAMS, and of course, Dialogue Enterprise steps in as the corporate sponsor for all SLASCOM events. Following Madhuka, we have our next speaker who will focus on quality assurance to value assurance through DevOps. So our CTAC 2020, our next speaker is going to be Suren Rodrigo, who is a senior software product engineering consultant at 99X Technology. He's had a keen interest in creating and delivering business value by utilizing technology and teamwork. Suren will delve into 15 years of his experience to discuss the effects of industry change, that has come about to the software quality assurance and engineering field. Some of the key topics covered during his discussion will include challenges that current software development teams face due to new industry demands, the profound paradigm shift the software development industry is undergoing from process-centric thinking to value-centric thinking, quality assurance process versus value assurance process, and of course, he will discuss on key lean and DevOps principles we can use to redefine our software development processes and the attributes of an SQA engineer with a value-centric mindset. That is a lot to cover in 30 minutes, a big challenge. Over to Suren Rodrigo. I'm sure he's going to live up to it. Suren, here you go. You have the next 30 minutes to share your views on quality assurance to value assurance through DevOps and everything else that you want to speak about. Yes, Suren Rodrigo.
Yes, thank you, Ajmal, for that introduction. And can you guys hear me clearly?
Yes, Suren, we can hear you and see your video and the slides as well.
Okay, excellent, excellent. So, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the session. It's great to see such a big turn up on this event. So, I will be talking about the approach of quality assurance to value assurance through DevOps. So Ajmal gave a good introduction to me. So I will not give a further introduction about myself, but I will talk a little bit about what we do at 99X. So basically, we have been there in the industry from 2004 and have done about 150 products in the Nordic region. And our specialty is actually creating high quality and high value digital products and doing digital product engineering and providing R&D services. And one of the key things in that process is that we need to actually provide highly dynamic teams who are actually cross-functional and value-centric. And we need to focus on continuous value delivery, and we need to focus on how do we create value to our customers continuously and enhance their existing value. And another thing that we are keen on creating is the winning products for our customers, who will actually become, these products will be the market leaders in their own respect. So achieving all that is a huge challenge, as you understand. So lot of concepts that we are going to discuss today is stuff that we have actually implemented within the company, and making the transition from from process centric to value centric is a process that we also underwent and is also undergoing at the moment. So it's a journey. So we will discuss further in the other slides, but to start things off, let's get an understanding of how the world is changing around us, right? So one thing I think even before the COVID-19 hit the world, this has been a trend, but now I think digitization has taken the world even in a more dramatic way than it was before with the COVID-19. But I think even before that, the world was changing. Right. So if you look at the graph here, this shows how quickly a 10 billion company is created. So as you can see, companies like Amazon and Uber, they have hit the 10 billion mark within less than 5 years. And if you look at all these major players who are actually creating huge businesses, 10 billion companies are all technology companies, right? So earlier, technology primarily was used as a sort of a way to make our lives easier. So what we created, the software we created were used as utilities to do our day-to-day job. But if you take what Airbnb and what Uber, what Waymo has done, they have actually completely disrupted the industry, right? So they have completely replaced what the industry meant. Right? So that is what technology is actually doing today. So that is the challenge we face as software development teams and software developers and QA engineers today. And another aspect of this is how quickly the technology is being adapted by people in the world. So as you can see, the graph shows this is only for US household, guys, not even a world in the world context. But if you see how quickly people are adapting things like phones, it has started in 2010. If you concentrate on the green line here, it has started from 2010, but it has already captured more than 80% population. So this is how fast the technology is taking over. And to support that, a lot of internet-based startups are actually coming up, as we saw in the earlier slide. And what does this bring to the environment? What does this do to the market? It creates uncertainty. And people are looking to build more and more products with limited budgets, limited time to market. They want to go to the market as soon as possible, right? And they want to do rapid changes quickly. So these are all the challenges that we are going to face when we are creating software in the future. And another aspect is there are a lot of emerging new technologies. Now, if you look at today, almost all the sessions that we did today were focusing on some aspect of machine learning, right? So this is no longer in the research arena, guys. So this has been now, this machine learning, IoT, these things are becoming rapidly the mainstream, right? So this graph is actually talking about what is the adoption rates of emerging technologies worldwide in 2020. So as you can see, right, things like cloud computing, more than, I think, close to 60% of the companies, or more than even that, are actually adopting these days. So these technologies bring in new set of challenges to us as as the software industry. Things like autonomous driving, machine learning, IoT-based tools, health equipments. All these things will create more demand in the business world. In turn, people will need more requirements. They will come up with more complex requirements, and we have to face this. So how do we actually face this? That is the key objective in this talk today. How do we actually face these challenges? So another aspect of this is that our technology, the reliance, is actually rapidly approaching a point where a mistake can cause lives, right? So if you look at this example, which I have in the screen, I think this is very popular, the Boeing 737 MAX 8 crashes that happened. Was a glitch in the MCAS flight control system, which was primarily governed by software at that time. And look at what happened in Myanmar, the Rohingya crisis. It was caused by the uncontrollable hate speech that actually happened in Facebook. And if you look at the Equifax hack in 2017, so 143 million people lost their identities. So they were stolen through this hack. So these impacts are huge. So a simple mistake can lead to huge impacts in our lives, guys. So that is the future that we are actually facing. So in this context, in these new challenges, the definition of what business value meant is actually changing, right? So the business value is no longer a fixed point. A business value is now an hypothesis held by organizations, right? So organizations actually do not know what is the value that they want to achieve. And they create hypotheses, and they want to prove or disprove that hypothesis as soon as possible. The world is changing at a very high rate. The business demand is changing at a very high rate, guys, that you can't fix to a point and say, okay, this is the business value that we want to concentrate for the next 5 years. So businesses who does that will not be able to survive. And what this means is that business need to adapt not from application to application, but from feature to feature. So if a business is just deploying an application and maybe waiting until they create another application to provide their services or upscale their services, will not be able to do that because the market is changing so rapidly. They want to change from feature to feature, right? And then they need to rediscover the business, what business value means, right? constantly. So it's a constant effort. They need to rediscover what business value is every day, right? So this is the challenge that we face. So if we look at a generalized version of our current approach that we use to do software development, right? So again, I want to emphasize that this is a generalization, right? So there can be teams who are not doing this particular approach and doing it in a much better way. But I want to generalize this in a way that which most of us are familiar with. So we today, most of the teams are using some form of an agile process, either Scrum or Kanban, to develop products. And we also have different types of engineers working together in a team, right? We have QA engineers, architects, BAs, and we have a product owner who is sitting either in Sri Lanka or in somewhere else, depending on where you do business. But how do we actually work, guys? So this is again a generalization of the activities that we do. So usually a BA will define a requirement, and then architect will design the architecture, the software engineers will build it, the QA engineers will test it, and PO will approve it. So this is a process we all know. But the thing to note here is that this is a sequential approach that we follow. Most of the time, we have what we call ball passing, right? So the developers do their part and then provide the software to the testers to do the testing. So this is a very common thing that is happening. So our question is this approach enough to face the challenges? And what does this mean, or rather, what does this mean in quality assurance aspect, right? So quality assurance is a major part of today's software development process, right? So what do we do as in quality assurance aspect today when we do software development? Again, this is a generalization. I want to emphasize on that, right? So the primary objective is to deliver a bugs-free product and a service. That is our primary objective. And we usually follow a bottom-up approach where we go from code quality to feature quality, right? And we usually follow standards to ensure that the quality is done in a proper manner, right? There are different standards we follow. Some standards are provided to us by ISO, so we follow those standards. So we follow a lot of standards in quality assurance to make sure that we build a product in a correct way. And one of the two things that we focus is that we are highly focused on product and service quality, and we are highly process oriented, right? So we want to follow a process in order to provide a quality product. I think this is a general way of doing things, and it has worked for us so far. But the problem is, with the changing world, with the changes that is happening in the business world, the real question is whether this is enough. So I would like to suggest, guys, that today what we are actually doing is a process-centric approach to product development. Or our thinking is highly process-oriented, right? Our primary driving force is a process. So in any team, we like to follow a process, and we want to ensure that we follow the process, and that we believe by following that process, we will deliver a high quality product that is valuable to our customer. But in order to face the challenges that we just discussed in the previous slides, guys, I would like to suggest that we need to change our thinking. We need to change our paradigm from a process-centric thinking into a value-centric thinking, right? What I mean by value-centric thinking is that delivering business value should be at the core of our objectives, right? Everything else, the process that we follow, the tools that we use, the technologies that we utilize, our skill set, everything should be a variable, right? We should start our thinking from where the business value is, what is required by the business value. Remember, business value is a hypothesis. So it's our objective to either prove or disprove whether this hypothesis is correct or wrong. So in that context, we have to start from how do we deliver the right business value and what do we need to do. And everything else, including the process, should be something that we utilize to get into that objective. So that is what value-centric thinking is all about, right? cross-functional teams of specialists who are 100% focused on the actual business value that is delivered rather than worrying about the process, right? So that is what value-centric thinking is. So what I'm suggesting is that we need to shift our thinking, our paradigm from this process-centric thinking into value-centric thinking in order to face the challenges that we face today, right? So what is the expectation in this context, in this business context? What is the expectation of a value-centric team? The expectation of a value-centric team is to actually, as I mentioned earlier, to prove or disprove the current business value or the current hypothesis the organization have in the most cost-effective manner, right? So they need to actually take the business value and develop it as soon as possible, get it to the market and verify whether it's correct or wrong. So that is their objective in a value-centric team, right? So in order to do that, there are certain characteristics or certain things that we have to have in a value-centric team, right? So the team needs to work together as one single unit, right? And as cross-functional specialists. So as I mentioned earlier in the generalized example which I gave you, the way that we work today, we have a lot of ball passing happening, right? From one specialist to the other, from developers to the QA to the DevOps guys to likewise. But in a value-centric approach, we work together as a single team, as a cross-functional specialist. So we are okay to actually work in any area that adds value to our product, right? And we need to figure out what value units actually flow through our development stream, so flow through our process. And we need to figure out what are the real value units. So when I say value units, I'm referring to features, bug fixes, technical debt fixes, and compliance related tasks, guys. So we need to be very specific about what we are actually flowing through our process, and also what is actually needed to achieve the current value or to prove or disprove the current business hypothesis. So that is something we need to pay attention to. And again, another thing is that we need to optimize the value stream to reduce waste. This is where the process is coming in, guys. So today, the way that we are working, we are a little bit attached to different processes. So if you are following Scrum, you try to follow Scrum in a textbook manner. You try to follow Kanban in a textbook manner, right? But what this demands in a value-centric team demands is that you need to adjust the process according to your requirement. You need to adjust it. You need to optimize the value stream so that you know the right value need to be developed, and you need to remove the wasteful activities from that value stream. And this can change from feature to feature also, right? So that is the challenge we have. And you need to plan, develop, test, and deploy value units. That's obvious. One of the two main important things in this new way of working is that you need to verify that you have achieved the intended purpose. So there should be feedback that is coming from production environment to developers saying whether we have actually delivered the right value that was expected, whether we have proven or disproved the hypothesis that we are working on. And then we need ways of learning from our experience and adapting our processes, adapting our tools, adapting ourselves to let go of the mistakes we did and then redo the whole process again, right? So these type of things we have to cultivate in our team. So this is what is expected from a value-centric team. So what is the impact on quality assurance engineers in this context? What does this all mean for QA engineers, right? So as I mentioned earlier, the nature of the new business demands quality assurance engineers to evolve beyond monitoring and verifying against defined standards. So this is again in my generalized example, which I gave you earlier, how we operate today. We have a tendency as QA engineers to sort of work in a proper process and follow good standards. Following standards is really good. That's no problem in that. But this goes beyond that, right? So what in the new business context, you are demanded to go beyond that level, right? And then you need to be sensitive to the process of discovery and rediscovery of business value. So as I mentioned, the meaning of business value will change in a very rapid manner, right? It's changing it's no longer a 5-year business plan. So no company will have a 5-year business plan, especially if you are in the technology domain. So their business plan will change, their business objectives will change. So you need to know that the process of discovery and rediscovery of that business value is happening. And as QA engineers, we need to adapt ourselves to be ready for that process, right? So these new changes demands as QA engineers to focus not only on the product quality and the overall the product quality and the service quality of the product or the service that we are developing, but this demands us to look at the whole ecosystem of product development, right? So that is what is demanded as quality assurance engineers today in this new business context, right? So simply put, it demands you to shift from quality assurance to a value assurance mindset. So as I mentioned, the shifting from process centric to value centric, like the process of shifting from process centric to value centric thinking, this demands, as QA engineers, this demands us to move from quality assurance thinking to more of a value assurance thinking, right? Okay, so now if you look at DevOps, DevOps provide us a very nice ecosystem to work on these concepts, right? So if you look at how DevOps works, so DevOps, the key principle of DevOps is to start with people, then move to process, and then move on to tools, right? So this is the approach that we can take. This is one of the approaches we can take in our attempt to do this, right? So people, process, and tools are going to be the key factors that we are going to focus, right? So now let's see what are the changes that we can do as individuals in ourselves and in our teams and in the processes that we do in our day-to-day lives when we are developing applications, and in tools and practices that we engage in developing products. So if you look at the people aspect, right, number one thing that you can do is to identify yourself as a specialist, right? You need to stop identifying yourself as a simple test engineer, a UI automation engineer, a performance engineer. You have to identify yourself as a quality specialist, right? Your specialization is that you provide quality, you are responsible for the quality of the product that you do, right? So that is the number one change where you need to do in yourself. And you need to be cross-functional. You need to build breadth in your knowledge. You need to learn coding for some level. You need to understand what others are doing. You need to understand the job of a BA, the job of a developer, because those things are important, and that will help you to be a better member in your cross-functional team, right? And also you need to guide and educate the team in quality assurance. So one thing you guys need to understand as quality assurance engineers is that we alone cannot do this. We alone cannot face these challenges. We need the whole team behind us. So one thing we need to do is to educate our team members on core concepts in quality assurance. So they are also aware of what does quality mean. So they know what is a regression test suite. They know what is the value of doing automation tests at the right time. So you need to educate your team members so that it's not only you who are responsible, but the whole team is responsible. So these are changes you can start doing in your team and in yourself. And what about the process aspect? So again, DevOps provides us a very nice framework to work on our process and how to improve our process towards adding more value and thinking in a more value-centric manner. So DevOps talks about 3 ways. First way that I'm discussing here is called optimizing flow from inception to production. So as quality assurance engineers, what we can do is we need to define what quality means in each of the stages in our production, right? In each of the value stream, that each of the stages in the value stream, we need to define what quality is, right? When the product or the feature that we are working is moving from development to testing, what are the things that we need a developer should check? So you need to define those things, and you need to do this with the team, right? You need to come up with a strategy. How do I ensure, as the quality specialist, you need to create this, but you need to take the support of the team and create a quality strategy in creating a high value product at the end. And the second way of DevOps talks about creating quick feedback loops from production to the developer. So you need to start track quality matrices such as number of bugs per features, and everything has to be tracked, but you need to ensure that you are tracking the right thing. We will discuss a little bit more in the tools section why this is important, but you are the one who has the best knowledge as a quality assurance engineer to decide on these things and educate the team and build in these features so that you get quick feedbacks about how the application is actually running in the production environment, right? And you need to start monitoring logs for potential issues. So this is primarily thought of as a responsibility of developers. No, this is a responsibility of the whole team, that you need to know what is happening and how do we find out issues before it's happened in the production environment, right? So these type of things has to be built in. And the third way is about building the culture of continuous learning, right? So you need to make a point to discuss quality as part of all your retrospectives. So the team should understand, that's where the education part also comes into play. The importance of quality needs to be driven by the quality assurance engineers within the team, but you can't do it alone. As I mentioned, you need to have the support of the entire team in doing that. So you need to make sure you discuss the quality perspective, you educate the team, you suggest and implement the right changes which is needed to do the change, do the improvements in quality aspect when you are working in a value-centric team. So these are some of the changes that you can do in your process starting from tomorrow. And what about the tools and practices aspect? So one of the key things you need to be concerned about as quality assurance engineers is that we need to stop premature optimization, right? You need to know when to apply the right tool at the right time. So for example, UI automation test in a new product might not be the best approach to do it, right? It might not be the most productive thing to do. So you need to always figure out what is the actual business value that I'm actually delivering by doing these activities. How fast am I going to deliver the product? So how do I remove the bottlenecks, and what is the tools in my specialization, that is quality assurance, that I can use to enable that process? So that is the thinking that you need to have. So premature optimization is something that you need to be concerned and you need to optimize. And using tools has to be done in a careful way, right? So most of the time we implement a lot of tools in our development teams, but in our experience, what we have found is having too much tools is a hindrance to the productivity. So as QA engineers, you should know what are the key tools I'm going to use in my process, in my development approach. And then you need to train the people, get the people to use them and stick to that, right? So that is one of the key things you need to be careful of. And lastly, and this is one of the most important points I would say, is identifying and measuring the right matrices for the business value delivery. So you should not track matrices for the sake of tracking it. You should know what is the right, how do I measure the actual business value? So in our context, as I mentioned, business value is a hypothesis, and you should understand what matrices will give me the correct understanding to see whether I am proving or disproving the business value I'm working on, right? And then you need to educate the team about that, and you need to make sure that you implement that with the team. So these are the things that you can do as quality assurance engineers today in the tools and practices aspect to be more value centric. So summing up everything, what are the key takeaways? If I just summarize the key takeaways in this presentation, team, guys, is that you need to understand that technology is changing, and technology is changing the world that we live in. And the future is going to be really challenging. And business, the core meaning of business value has changed. Now, business value is defined as a hypothesis where it can evolve according to the market demands, right? And it's not only you, the whole team is responsible for the product quality. So you can't just work alone. No matter how good you are, you can't produce a high quality product without the support of everybody. So you need the whole team to be backing you up, and whole team to understand what quality means, right? And you need to start thinking first about the business value, right? And then work your way backwards about the tools, the processes, the methodologies that you're going to implement to achieve the said business value, right? And what you can simply do is start by making one change at a time. So I have discussed so many items, some items here, right, which you can do, right? And what I suggest is that you start with the people aspect. Make one change at a time in yourself and in your team, and see what results that it brings to your development process. I think that is the best thing to do. And that is all the time I think I have for the presentation, guys. So I'm looking forward for the questions. Please let me know if any questions. Please post it in the form that is provided, and we can discuss further. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you so very much, Suren Rodrigo. I think spot on time in terms of timing and content covered. Rock solid. I love listening to it from a perspective of seeing a lot of technical presentations throughout. This one took us a few feet above there and gave us a more customer experience and result-driven discussion, particularly talking about the influx of mobile devices and the platforms that are coming in as a result, and the changing industry, because that's what is happening as a result. Focused on customer experience through the window of the value-centric theme, about branding and placing yourself as a developer. Recommendation is to place yourself as a quality specialist rather than a developer, then looking at you as a tester, a quality specialist, because that's exactly what you're providing to the people. And of course, the finish of emphasizing the importance of business value and thinking in those lines, I think was just a fabulous talk and absolute justice to the topic, which was predominantly on quality assurance and how it transitions to the journey of value assurance through DevOps. That was Suren Rodrigo, Senior Software Product Engineering Consultant from 99X, and it was a lovely discussion around that area. Like he did point out at the end of his presentation, we are open for questions. The link for the questions is shared on the chat window. On Zoom, if you do click the chat and scroll up, you probably would see it. Maybe Tarindra could share it one more time to be more recent and up to date. You can click on that and send in any questions that you may have. We will take up questions towards the end of the session. Right, what's coming up next is the final talk of the evening. Like they say in the classics, it's last and by no means the least. Our next speaker, rather the final speaker, Niroshan Landers, Director, Client Services, Ozenta Digital Labs Private Limited. He will speak on beauty of API testing. He's an experienced technical solution innovator with 17 years plus experience in managing Fortune 500 clients and servicing multi-geographical clients with development teams distributed in different countries. Niroshan will explain how a state of the API test automation tool helped their clients to streamline API testing for a smarter and faster delivery by bringing down the testing effort from a year's worth to less than a month, but also in the journey enabled reusable capability. Well, that is a quick introduction about Niroshan. I call upon Niroshan to take over the forum. Tell us what you got in terms of beauty of API testing over the next 30 minutes or so. Invitation is to Niroshan Landers.
Okay, first of all, good evening to all the participants. It's been really nice that we have a good number of participants sitting throughout 4-hour session. And this would be the last session, and I know that it is very difficult for me to keep the attention and keep the focus, because you guys were listening to some very interesting topics, and your brains are filled with a lot of technical and business process things. And my challenge is to find some space in your brains and put the idea that we have worked in the past and make sure that you get something out of this session as well. So quickly, Ajmal did some introduction about me, and let me quickly give you some things that he missed. I'm Niroshan Landers, as you all know now, and been graduated from the University of Moratu, and then spent about 10 years at Virtusa. And there I worked as a quality assurance professional. And then after 10 years, I moved to Ozenta Digital and started my career as a client services person. And in 2019, Oxenta became Oxenta Digital Labs and Oxenta as two different entities, and we are now in Oxenta Digital Labs. What we do, in a nutshell, we have a group of very highly talented and skillful resources who are delivering transformational technology services and enabling our clients to outperform in their competition. And mainly our consulting services are on the engineering and quality assurance aspects. And we make sure that our B2B and B2C business communications are being properly handled through the solutions that we are providing to our clients. How does this Oxenta service offerings are being formulated? Mainly, we have about 8 to 9 different areas that we are servicing. Our main strengths are on engineering services, mobility, and QA, and we do a little bit of cloud, big data, CRM related activities as well. And then again, we will be doing a lot of business consulting and digital transformation support services for our clients. Help and give early warnings before it fails. We have developed our own UI test automation framework as well. And the tool that I'm going to explain today is the API testing automation tool that we have created. So before going to the technical things and how we implement it, let's quickly refresh the knowledge on APIs. Basically, what is an API? I think most of you might have heard that word, application programming interface, or different names that they are to call the API. But this is a contract between an application and another application. And the contract says, if you call me in a particular manner, I'll give you the proper response. And that is basically what any API would be. We have several types of APIs, mainly web services APIs like REST, SOAP, XML remote procedure calls, and JSON remote procedure calls. And we have source code APIs, which are basically library-based or class-based, which all the developers are very familiar with using those APIs. And then we have the object remoting APIs and hardware APIs. And also the OS functions that mainly deal with the operations, what operating systems would provide us to handle. So the tool that we are going to discuss here are mainly focused on the web services. It can handle all the REST services, SOAP, XML, and JSON RPC services. Again, we can categorize the APIs into 3 different types based on the policy that it can release to the clients. One is a private API, which is internally developed APIs for internal communication. Mainly those internal APIs or private APIs will be limited to a particular organization. So there we are not that much focused about the security aspect of the API, and we see the least amount of documentation for those APIs, because it's everyone knows that how that API works, and no one needs to know where the documentations are. And at a point, everyone knows how to use it, but if someone asks a different question, they don't know even where the API is or the code base of that API is. Then we have these partner APIs. Mainly the partner APIs are among the trusted business partners. Could be a client to a server, or software as a service. We can provide certain APIs for the external people to communicate with our systems and get certain things done. And definitely, most likely, those APIs will be with a token which get expired in a certain time frame. And a lot of integrations are there for that kind of API, where the complete API suite might get exposed to the external party. And the external party is responsible to call one API, get a certain response, extract some data from that API, and then form the other request that needs to get additional data. For an example, if I need to find a client who is active, first I might need to send the NIC, national ID card number, and get the client's ID. Using that client ID, I might need to send another call for a different API to find out whether he's an active user or not. Then comes the most famous API type, which is the public APIs, where certain software programs expose their APIs to the third parties to get the services. And they mainly will follow certain standards. And mostly they will have some sort of authentication mechanism used. So the person should identify himself with a username or password and get a session ID, and then you use that ID to get the services of the publicly opened APIs. Pretty much those APIs, since we are much more worried about the security and standardizations, we usually tend to open one API for the external world and allow them to get multiple services through that API, be it finding a username, to finding the geographical location, to finding his account details. We might give only one API and ask them to adhere to the given contract, provide me all the necessary information, required information, with another parameter saying this is the exact information path that I need to travel, and give me that information. So internally, once we receive that request, we might call multiple APIs that are private to the organization and provide a response, a single response to the external party. So these are the same things what all our clients are going through, and we got a business problem to solve out with a limited time frame. And this is to one of our leading global telco companies. They wanted their existing private partner external APIs, all those APIs, to be exposed to the public, to give them the capability to create their own mobile applications and do some value addition services, and we partner with them to share the revenue. So they were supposed to expose all these public APIs using API gateway. They had about good 1,200 plus APIs built internally, and they wanted to expose all those APIs, so the functionalities of those APIs, using about 250 to 300 public APIs that are going to get published on API gateway. So they wanted to come and give that work to us, and they asked us to deliver it within a very short time period. And some of our development teams had to engage and develop those intermediate APIs to do the integration part and make it the public API for the external parties. So the challenges what we faced are mainly on certain things that they have asked us to adhere. One is the importance of doing database validations. Whenever we are demanding a request or a particular information, we need to make sure that the right value that is being taken from the database and showed to the client. Then certain APIs do certain activities, and it won't allow us to reuse those data. Say, for an example, if you want to activate a user, once the user is activated, we won't be able to reuse that user for any more activation. So we have to again go and find a newly created user to do the test. Then they had several different environments, and their systems were deployed in multiple countries as well. So we had to do the same testing on multiple environments in multiple geographical locations as well. The regression suit was mammoth. Like when you were talking about that 1,000 plus internal private partner APIs, they had about good 6,000 plus test cases to execute, and they wanted us to do it bi-daily or every other day. We had to execute all those test cases and give them the progression of those tests as well. And for the public world, it was one API, and internally we had to validate that we call the correct APIs and formulate the final response for the external party. Almost all the APIs were secured and wanted some authentication mechanism to get the service. So testing should be done accordingly. We were not allowed to disable the authentication, so secured aspects of those APIs. We had to live with those and do the testing. And the worst part of it is none of those APIs been exposed to us. We didn't have the access to the code base. They were simply exposed to us, and very few had the documentation as well. And they wanted us to do a complex performance testing and ensure that once we expose all those APIs, clients will have a reasonable response time when they make a call to one of those APIs. And up to that point, the entire team was heavily relying on open source tools and its limitations, and they were forcing us to use those open source tools as well, because they were not very happy to go with a commercial tool. And then there were different levels of people who were expecting certain reports, and one single report wouldn't work for all the stakeholders. So we quickly jumped into find out what are the tools that they were using, and mainly they were using SOAP, UA, and Postman. And we were looking at Catalan as an option because Catalan had a fully functional version that we can execute for about a good month. Sufficiently gives us enough time to prove that Catalan could have been the solution. So these are the comparisons what we did and the results what we found. So most of those tools like SOAP, UI, or Postman were not giving the required functionalities that we wanted. The database level validations were not given by any of those things, but a very limited amount of database validations are available with Catalan. And the reports, we had to go with the SOAP UI commercial version if you want to get the comprehensive reports, and Postman was giving only very small amount of data in those reports. So we thought that, okay, now we can't go with a commercial tool and we can't go with the available open source tool. So we had to come out and do something to secure this business. So we thought of going ahead with a in-house built solution. And our target was to make sure that this in-house built solution will handle at least 75% or more future API testing needs as well. And the next challenge what we faced is the team, the experience of the team what we had. They were pretty much freshers, or the people who have about 1 to 2 years experience, who are not very much familiar with API testing. And then the solution should be able to be consumed by those people. And they were in a very tight timeline. So we were not in a position to demand from the client to get certain things done. We had to do whatever that we can do within the available limitations. We had to enable the non-technical users to create test cases, and we had to make sure that unattended executions with minimal changes, which is when we are changing one environment to another environment, we should be able to do it with minimal changes to the existing suite. So if it is like Kenya and Uganda, we can't use that data set. So we had to use the minimal changes to the system and enable the suite to be ready to execute. And then we wanted to have different layers of reporting, and certain reports should have been pushed to cloud as well. And we had to pull data from a pointing database and execute the test cases, which was the solution that we came out with. So before executing the test case, we were running certain things and find out whether the right data is available in that environment to test that particular test case. Then we had to do certain amount of performance testing readings. We had to populate some readings for the performance testing while the JMeter script was doing the backend loading. Then we had to mimic the manual users' thinking and their execution styles. I'll explain those things in the upcoming slides. And we had to backtrack and find some information and use those information for future executions. I'll explain that as well once we go to the next set of slides. So we came up with a very simple solution, sticking into basics. We didn't use very sophisticated solutions. We thought that we will switch to Excel as the form that being given to the testers. And one technical person would do certain amount of configurations and do some work to ensure that the non-technical people can run the test cases. So our solution had two components. One is the initialization. This is the high-level architecture that you see in our solution. So we had an Excel driver, a simple Excel file. It will connect with the web service. If it is a SOAP, we have the Visual file, which will give the details about the contract between those two components. And if it is a REST service, we've demanded the Swagger file in a particular format. So Swagger file is an open-ended document. The developer can do the Swagger file in whatever the way that he preferred. But we had to force the team to give us the Swagger file in a particular format to make our lives easier. By consuming those two files, we've been able to generate some templates. I'll show you one template that we generated in a later slide. Once the template is generated, we do certain magics, which I will explain. And we can now have a test suite and do some execution. So all those Excel sheets are available, and we do some pre-validations to make sure that all those test cases can be executed in any environment. And then we populate some data, we pull some data from database and previous execution results, etc., and form the request. The request will be sent to the endpoint, will receive a response, we pass that response and do certain validations and some categorizations to be formed in that response, and do the validations required by the end user. The end user provide all those information in Excel sheet, and we do the validations based on that Excel. And we do even certain post data validations, such like connecting to the database and find out whether the database correctly updated and whether the records count been increased, etc. And we had a very multi-layered reporting module, which give the HTML reports to the log files to publishing the data directly on a cloud-enabled database. Let's get into the initiator mode. We had a very simple test Excel file with those two sheets, what you see on left and right. Left sheet, the person who is going to create those test cases need to know to which database that they wanted to connect to get the data or to validate the data. We've limited the connection to only one database. So if the system has to test on multiple databases, means during the single execution test cycle, if we had to connect to a user database and a transaction database, the tool had that limitation. We had to limit it to one database. Then we, at the initiation phase, we find out what type of a web service that we are going to test. Here we have selected the SOAP. It could be REST, it could be JSON RPCO, any other web service test. And we need to make sure that what process that we are going to do. So we had two processes. One is to create the templates, the other one is to execute. So we need to select the right process. Based on the process that you select, certain parameters will get changed. Here, the directory will be the location where all the test cases are stored at. If it is execution, it will be the directory where the results are stored at on Excel. The other things are pretty much configured from the back end. We can give a test case name, or we can give the folder name, so it will pick all the test cases available in that folder itself. And we need to correctly point it to the endpoint. When you are executing it, it is not needed because this information is anyway stored in the template itself. Okay, this is the template what we create. This is what the end user will be using. So this is for a web service. So you can see that the request keys are there, and the end user has to only fill the data. So for that data, we can refer some data that we have collected from a query as well. We'll explain it to you, right? And then on the response side, again, we need to provide the information that we need to validate in the response in those cells. You can see a couple of other sections. I will explain one by one. The global validation section will ensure that our mimicking part of the end user, like those people who have tested the APIs might know that when a large XML is there, you're only looking at a particular section of that API. You might be looking at on a particular key and value pair, and you say that, okay, this test got passed. So we want to make sure that we do the same thing, and we can simply get rid of a lot of part of the response and look at only the particular value. And sometimes you might only look at the number of child nodes received. We can do that as well. We can do find what is the number of the count of child objects that we've received. And then we have the query validations, directly sending the queries to the database and find out whether the things got updated properly, because sometimes the response will give you only one message saying successfully updated, and we need to make sure that the database got updated. We can write those queries in a simple SQL format and do this validation, right? And we can even keep some variables to be used. And the beauty of this tool is this will be a one Excel file. We can refer to any Excel file, the tab, and a particular value, and provide that value with the execution time. So if I need to say, give the user ID, if I have an authentication module that I need to execute first, I need to first put that sheet on the as the first sheet of that Excel. Second one would be the get name thing. And once I do the authentication, I'm providing a user ID. I can refer to that in this Excel sheet. The end user simply has to give the sheet name and the variable name. I'll explain those things later. So those are the things what we get in the template creation part. query and variables, we used simple queries, and we did certain standards. We asked our testers to use those standards to ensure that tool gives the accurate result without any issue. So all queries should have a unique name that is limited to that particular sheet, because when we are referring to that from another sheet, we give the sheet name and the query name. And all query field values should be aliased with a name so that we can directly refer through that name. And basic SQL standards are applied. During the execution, if you need to execute the query twice, we had to write the query again with a different name. We had to follow it. And we need to make sure that any query that we are writing returns only one record. And if it is recording more than one record, the tool takes only the first record. That was a standard. Even in the variable declaration, that was the same thing. We had to uniquely identify a variable. We can use text, date, integers, and real as the fields for those things. And when we are comparing variables, it's always equal or not equal. We are not going to do any other complex comparisons. Variable is always a global variable which can be accessed from any tab. Then the global validation rules, like should I look at only the keys that I received in the response, or should I look at the keys and values both? Should I compare both? And then I can find out the count, how many keys that I received or how many child nodes that I received. And say for an example, if it is a date, should I only look at the year part of that? If it is a name, should I look at only the first name of it? And we can even ignore a few fields. Don't compare it. We can give the instructions to the tool by simply adding a question mark, and the tool won't compare it. And we can do the specific path validation. Say for an example, go for the QA department, find the employee ID, and in that you should have the employee ID ABC as an employee ID. If it is a massive response, we can limit our validation to a particular path of that response. Then on pre-query executions, it will execute all the pre-queries in order that we write it in the Excel sheet. The Excel sheet which I showed you doesn't show the macros that I have included. So those macros will enable us to add new rows, etc. And once we are executing all the pre-queries, we can refer to the data that is used in the request, or we can do vice versa as well. We can run a pre-query and get the result and refer it in the request, or we can refer to the value provided in the request and run the query. And then there's a section to validate certain things before we execute the test case, such like should there be a valid user in the system, or should the count be 10, something like that, right? And then based on whatever the validations and the results of the queries, we can take decisions whether to execute that test case or not, right? Then we report those deviations. Based on the decisions what we take, we might move to the next test case, or we might execute the test case. On the request formulation, it can pull the data from the authentication sheet, which is the mandatory sheet if there's authentication need, and it will be the first test case that get executed. And then we can pull data from any pre-executed and past test case responses. We can get any data from a already executed query. We can get any data from a already executed request data. Similarly, any populated variables, and then form the request. It could be a JSON request. It could be passing parameters on the header or passing parameters in the body. The way how the template is given to us, we just need to fill those data, and then it will create the request for us. This will ensure that the syntax errors or the minor mistakes what the end users will do in SOAP or REST is eliminated. So always a proper standard request is made from the data that we have provided. And we get a what called snapshot or the log of that request that is being made as well, right? And then we send the request and receive the response, and there only that we are using a existing library, could be SOAP or another library, to just to handle the request and receive the response part. Again, when the response is received, we wait for a certain time period, be it 1 minute, and if we don't receive the response within that 1 minute, we'll fail the test case. Once we receive it, we store it in a in the Excel sheet itself and look for certain deviations. And then we do pass the response. We break it into whatever the required pieces that we need to validate and run the validation part. And each and every validation what we are doing, each and every execution what we are doing, we are marking the status of it. We are marking whether it's a pass or failure. So you get a very detailed view about what is being passed and what is being failed, right? And then after the post query execution, response passing, we do execute all the post queries to find out whether the validations, updates have been done to the database, whether the counts went up, etc., etc. And then we validate the response against the expected values. So we have already given the values. We might have asked the system tool to pull the values from an existing test case or from the database, and everything is recorded here. Any step that we are doing, the query that we execute, we write down the query that we executed, and we write down the results that we received. So at any point, we have the complete log to look at what we've done, where it went wrong, and what was the issue what we see. Right? So what are the benefits that we've received from it? This is what the real interesting part of it. We've been able to downsize the effort that was required to execute the test cases, 6,000 test cases every other day. And we've used 3 developers to develop the tool and a few fresh QA engineers to create those test cases. And we've been able to execute all those 6,000 test cases within a time span of 5 hours. So anytime what we execute the test suite, within 5 hours, we have a very comprehensive result set. And we've been able to store that results in a database so that you can see the progression of the execution, how the modules are becoming stable from time to time. We had all the data available locally. So we've been able to analyze where it went wrong at any point. And another advantage what we received is the non-technical people's ability to quickly get into this testing role. Because a person who knows about the fundamentals of a request and the fundamentals of a response can quickly look at that Excel sheet and fill the information that is required to run the test case. So that information might be needed to be pulled from a database. And again, we are expecting the minimal SQL knowledge from that person to write a query which returns the exact record what we need. And then the validations request versus expect response was a very simple interface, not a big XML that you need to travel up top to bottom. And if you're only looking at a particular section in that response, in that Excel sheet, only the particular section would be there. And if you want to validate a complex XML, still you can add the additional parts to the response section and make sure that it gets properly validated. And we have standardized the rules for pre and post queries. And by doing that, and by storing the data that we received and the queries that we executed, there was a very good, trustworthy manner in the way how we tests are being executed. Because at any point, if the client demands us saying, let me know what the request that you sent, we have it in our hand. Let me know what is the query that you executed, we had that in our hand. If we do a manual testing, then that information may not go into a logger. With this tool, we had more than enough information at any point to quickly jump into the issue and do a drill down and find out where the issue is. We've been able to expand the test suite very easily, because if you want to run it for multiple permutations, we have 2 options. One is to simply copy and paste the same sheet again and again and change the values. Or we could have used the Excel data provider or connecting to a database and using a data set. We've been able to run the same API for different data permutations. And beauty of it is that once we create a very solid test suite that had a lot of queries than fixed data, we've been able to simply change the database. And then it will pull the data from the database and provide the necessary results with enough information. And we've been able to enable certain switches in the tool and make sure that our request and response times are properly documented. So at any point when the JMeter was doing the load from the backend, we've been able to run multiple scenarios parallelly using parallel threads of our tool and get the response times. And it simply allowed the performance test team to get a very real user feeling, because JMeter doesn't provide the right data when you are sending a request through a web interface. But this tool simply provides the last millisecond that it ends the sending part of the request, and the time that it ends receiving the response. In between, there could have been a network latency, but that is what the end user would be feeling. So we've been able to conduct the load testing and performance testing using this tool itself. And the next interesting aspect of this tool is to support the integrated testing. Usually when a manual tester is testing, he will connect to one API, get the response, extract some data, and then populate the next request, send it to another endpoint. But in this tool, it was a series of Excel sheets, and it executed from the left to right. So we just need to make sure that the order of the API calls should have been maintained in the Excel sheet in the correct manner. And always we can refer the previous Excel sheets data using a reference value. And we don't need to manually do any data fillings. And it could be like doing a series of workflow, a series of actions in a workflow, and still ensure that all the APIs are properly called using whatever the response that we received in previous calls. And the other beautiful part of it is that though this is being Excel, we've given the luxury for the non-technical users to use this tool. We have exported certain APIs. So for the Selenium automation framework, what we have, we could have simply called that API, pass the relevant information about the Excel, etc., and we could have simulate the API call that should have gone from the backend. So we've been able to get some benefits by integrating it to the existing framework what we have. And the other important thing is the reusability, because it's Excel. We can give it to any person, and we can give the library, and at a single run of a command, we get all the scripts updated with the relevant data from that database itself. So by all these things, we've been able to deliver, and we've been able to secure more business with that client. And he was very delighted with the way how we handled this engagement. And I have not seen a similar tool yet in the industry. And the good news is that our organization is planning to make it an open source tool. And sooner you will see this tool in SourceForge. And we will be doing a the lightweighted version. We'll be doing a limited functionality version and make it open source. And we will still continue the development of this tool and use it for our commercial purposes. And we are planning to bring this tool to a test as a service, a new concept in future. If anybody wants to test APIs, he can come in and register with us and use this as a test as a service. And that concludes our session. And I want to specifically thank the SLASCOM QA Forum for giving me this opportunity to present this tool to the right people in this country. And some people who helped me, Prasad Nanayakar, who was the former CEO of Oxenta, Chandana Ranasinghe, who is the current CEO of Oxenta Digital, and Afrad Amir and Dinipul Samarkon were the developer and the QA who helped me to do the complex development tasks and make sure the tool is functioning as expected by conducting several test rounds. If you have any questions, the URL is given. You can raise those questions. I'll be the last person answering the Q&A session. And you have the QR code as well. Thanks a lot for participating in the session, and I believe I have added some value to you, and I have given something for you to think about. So I'm eagerly waiting for some very interesting questions. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Nirosh and Landers. I think fabulous take through of what APIs are, what it can do, and towards the latter part on how exploring it in multiple angles to bring out the best result, and a quick summary of what is possible and what cases have delighted clients and how you make them come back to you again and again. An interesting tool that you did speak of at the end, version of it going to be open source. Another one, the full edition, probably going to be available commercially for a cost. That is coming, but for now, that's the heart of CTAC 2020. We've had 6 topics spoken out by 7 speakers, which includes our keynote at the beginning. We did ask you to send in any questions to which you have responded, and we have questions that have come in throughout the session. We will now move on to the Q&A, where we will take questions that have come in. Given the restriction of time that is in place, we will take 2 questions each from each of the participants. We will take 2 questions for each of the speakers and get them to answer those 2 questions from the pool of questions that we've collected so far. So the questions will be answered by the speakers in the order that they spoke. So first up will be our keynote speaker answering questions. Since it's the Q&A and the last part of the event, I would kindly request all of the speakers to probably come on camera and be available throughout and contribute to any questions if you do have any. While we wait for everyone to come up online, I'm going to move on with the first question for Anton Angelo. It's coming from one of our participants. Anton, here's the question: how can we select what's the best design pattern to use for automation? So the question is about what can you do, or what should you do, or how can we select the best design pattern to use for automation?
It really depends. There isn't the best pattern. I mean, this is why I wrote a book, because there are different scenarios and context when some design pattern is best over another. Also, there is even for me, when almost a decade I'm dealing with patterns and frameworks, etc. It's for me it's challenging sometimes to pick the right one, and it really depends on how many people are participating in the in the automation in the team, what is their seniority, and for example, if only you are using the pattern, then the framework, then maybe you don't need patterns for allowing extensibility and making so much complex design, And this is why even through the book, I designed a system where you can put ratings, like measuring particular of these attributes that I mentioned during the presentation about the readability, maintainability, extensibility, and basically calculating the average of these ratings can give you like a metric for picking the right design. So this is one way you can do it like systematically, not just like by emotion,
All right, thank you so very much, Anton. One more question that has come your way is that, have you integrated the page object model and the decorator design pattern together in your framework? I'll repeat the question. Have you integrated the page object model and the decorator design pattern together in your framework?
Yes, I did. Actually, just for a second, I will share my screen so that you can see directly, the whole solution. Actually, here I integrated even more patterns. Here you can see all of the classes from the decorator, right? And here I implemented also a few other patterns. The up design pattern that is basically responsible for it's something like a factory design pattern where this is responsible for creating and navigating to the particular page. And then here I'm creating a page, and here I implemented another pattern called font API that you're basically you're executing the page object and methods from it, but through this chaining methods. This is another name of the pattern. basically you're returning the same page object. This is how it is to implement that form. But yeah, it's possible, and it's really great to integrate them both. Yeah.
Thank you, Anton, for that clarity and a display of the answer as well.
This is a blank sheet. There were a lot of submissions for speaker sessions, and expert set of panel decided the final set of speakers. I know all of you spend a lot of time preparing for the sessions and making some fruitful sessions today. I would need to specially thank our keynote speaker, Anton and Menaka from Zone 24/7, Ranil and Tarindu from Cambio Software, Madhuka from Cisco Labs, Suren from 99X, and Niroshan from Oxenta. Thank you so much, guys. Also want to give a special thank to Sandra, the Vice Chairperson of SLASCOM and Forum Board Lead for Quality Forum. Thanks for the leadership and mentoring. I want to give a special thank for Ajmal, who did the difficult task of comparing the virtual conference. Thank you so much, Ajmal. Further, I want to thank SLASCOM corporate office members who supported us numerous ways. Also the digital marketing team, Elephant Crew for content designing and SM coverage, and brand IMC for the PR coverage. I need to make a special thanks to the organizing committee, starting from Quality Forum lead Tarindra from 99X, who was our inspiration, and Janit from Cisco Labs, our go-to person when something went wrong. Also, rest of the organizing committee members, Kishan from Cisco Labs, Udisha from Pearson, Tilina from Tikri, Darshika from Zone 24/7, and Chatura from Cisco Labs, who put up many hard yards during the last few months, especially the last few weeks. Further, there were a lot of other colleagues who helped us many ways. Thanks a lot, everyone. I wanted to specially mention Rochelle, who took the most burden in organizing the conference, communicating with agents with flyers, sending emails, registering participants. List is going on and on. Thank you, Rochelle. Thanks a lot for all of you for making CTAC 2020 a success under a lot of difficult situations. So I don't want to take any more time from you. Please fill the feedback form we have shared in the Zoom chat and send back to us. Your feedback is so much valuable for us. So have a great evening and see you in CTAC 2021. Thank you. Over to you, Ajmal.
Thank you so very much, Dara. That was Dara Jasingh, her event lead for CTAC 2020. I'd like to finish off on the note of something that she said. It's a massive success. So hashtag CTAC 2020, hashtag a true success. Absolutely, I think she did justice in a complete closing remark. Particular thank you to the speakers. Without them, we wouldn't have any of this knowledge on the table now. And like I always do at the end of the session, I think what keeps a session lively is the participation and the contribution from the participants. In this particular session, we had a consistent number of almost close to 200 participants from the beginning, right towards the end. Now the number has gone down, but we had consistency in the participation, which makes me believe and puts a lot of trust on the fact that this conference was a certain value addition. Feedback form, like Dara did mention, is on the chat. The link to that, the bit.ly link to that is there. You can click that link, hit that link, or scan the QR code on your screen right now to send us any feedback that you may have in your mind, or anything that you want to tell us or the organizer as a part of CTAC 2020. That is an absolute must. So that's that. We come to the end of Colombo Test Automation Conference 2020, version number 4, and the first virtual conference for CTAC, which happens in 2020. Many more to come. This one, hashtag CTAC 2020, hashtag success. Thank you so very much, everyone who participated, everyone who's connected with me online. Have yourselves a fabulous evening and a great week coming up. Thank you so much, and have yourselves a fabulous night.